The clock on the studio wall read 11:47 p.m. when I first noticed the static. Not ordinary static, the kind that crackles between stations on a stormy night. This was something else. A low, rhythmic pulse beneath the dead air, like a heartbeat trying to break through from somewhere far away. I'd been a radio operator for 17 years, had logged thousands of hours in this cramped booth with its peeling linoleum and coffee-stained console, and I'd never heard anything quite like it. Testing, I said into the microphone, adjusting my headphones. This is WKRL-AM 980 on your dial, the voice of the Tri-County. Is anyone out there? The static continued its steady pulse. I glanced at the equipment readings. Everything normal, which meant the interference wasn't coming from any local source. Somewhere out there, something was broadcasting on a frequency that shouldn't exist, bleeding through the cracks of our carefully organized spectrum. I leaned back in my swivel chair, the springs groaning in protest. Outside the studio's soundproofed walls, the October night pressed against the windows like a held breath. The temperature had dropped 20 degrees in the last hour, and a fog had rolled in from the coast that seemed almost alive, thick, spectral, swallowing the streetlights whole. Sorry about that, folks, I said, forcing a professional tone. Looks like we're experiencing some atmospheric interference. Probably that solar activity they've been warning us about. I didn't believe that for a second. Neither did the other voice in my head, the one that had been growing louder over the past few days, the one that whispered about the calls I'd been taking. Strange calls, disturbing calls. The first one had come in 4 days ago at 2:17 a.m., right at the tail end of my shift. A woman's voice, trembling and thin as cigarette smoke. I think my husband is dead, she'd said, but he's still moving. I'd asked her to repeat that, certain I'd misheard through the crackling line. He's been dead for 3 days, she continued. I saw him flatline at the hospital. They pronounced him, but he came home tonight. He's in the backyard, just standing there. I can see him from the kitchen window, and he's not right. His eyes are wrong. I tried to calm her down, suggested she call the police, but she'd already hung up before I could finish the sentence. The second call came the next night. A different voice. Same trembling quality. Same story about someone who had died but hadn't quite stopped. By the third night, the calls were coming in clusters. 5, then 12, then more than I could count. People reporting their neighbors standing motionless in the street at 3 a.m. Hospital staff describing patients who had been declared dead sitting up on their gurneys. A frantic paramedic who'd witnessed a car accident victim climb out of his totaled vehicle with his skull caved in and walk away into the darkness. The mainstream news hadn't picked it up yet. They were still running stories about the unusual weather patterns, the record low temperatures, the strange aurora that had been visible even this far south. That aurora, that's what they blamed for the power fluctuations, the cell phone outages, the weird static bleeding through every communication channel. But I knew better. I'd been in this business long enough to recognize the shape of a story that was trying to bury itself. I checked my watch, 11:52 p.m. I had 8 minutes before the top of the hour, when I'd have to go to the commercial break and then sign off for the night. 8 minutes to figure out what to do about the growing unease in my gut. The studio door creaked open behind me. I spun around, heart hammering. Maggie, my night engineer, stood in the doorway with a mug of coffee in each hand. Her face was drawn, the circles beneath her eyes dark as bruises. We'd worked the graveyard shift together for 5 years, and I'd never seen her look so tired. Still getting that interference? She asked, setting one of the mugs on the edge of my console. Worse than ever. What do you make of it? Maggie shook her head, her graying hair escaping from its customary bun. It's not atmospheric. I've checked every reading twice. Whatever's causing that signal, it's not coming from the weather. What is it then? She hesitated, chewing her lower lip. I'd known Maggie long enough to recognize when she was holding something back. Spit it out, I said. I went outside an hour ago, she said quietly, just for a smoke break. The fog was so thick I could barely see my hand in front of my face, and I heard something. Heard what? Voices, whispering. It sounded like, I don't know how to describe it, like 1,000 people whispering at once, all the same words, all the same rhythm. I couldn't make out what they were saying, but I could feel it, right here. She pressed a hand to her sternum. like something was vibrating in my chest. The static on my headphones suddenly shifted. The steady pulse quickened, becoming more frantic, more urgent. I adjusted the gain, trying to isolate whatever frequency was bleeding through. "Can you hear that?" I asked. Maggie leaned in, listening. Her eyes went wide. "That's not static. That's voices," I finished. "I know." The words were still indistinct, buried beneath layers of interference, but there was no mistaking the cadence. Multiple voices, overlapping, speaking in unison, a chant, almost, a mantra. The same words repeated over and over. I cranked the gain to maximum, desperate to understand what I was hearing. For a fraction of a second, the static cleared, and I caught a fragment of the message. "The sky opens, and the blood-red light descends, and all who see it shall be remade." Then the interference crashed back in, louder than before, and the voices were gone. Maggie and I stared at each other across the console. The temperature in the studio seemed to drop several degrees. "Did you hear that?" I whispered. "I heard it." She wrapped her arms around herself, shivering. "What the hell is going on, Frank?" Before I could answer, the phone on my console began to ring. Not the studio's main line, but the emergency line. The one that only rang when something was seriously wrong. The one that had been silent for 15 years, ever since the tornado that leveled half of Millbrook County. I picked it up with a trembling hand. "Frank Morrison," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Frank, it's Dale from the Emergency Dispatch Center." Dale's voice was sharp, clipped, the voice of a man barely holding it together. "You need to get off the air now." "What? Why?" "I'm serious, Frank. We're getting reports from all over the county. Something's happening. Something we don't understand. There are people." The line crackled with interference, and for a moment, Dale's voice was swallowed by that same rhythmic pulse. "Standing in the streets, just standing there, hundreds of them, and they're all staring up at the sky." I looked toward the studio window, but the blinds were drawn. I couldn't see what was happening outside. "Tornado?" I asked, though I already knew that wasn't it. "Some kind of storm?" "No," Dale said, and his voice cracked on the word. "No, Frank. This is worse. Much worse. They're not moving. They're just standing there, all of them staring up at something. And when the police try to approach them, they..." Another burst of interference, longer this time, almost drowning him out. "They ripped them apart. I saw it with my own eyes. One of our officers tried to move a woman out of the intersection, and she just tore his throat out with her teeth. Then she went back to staring at the sky like nothing had happened." The phone went dead in my hand. Maggie was staring at me, her face pale as bone. "What do we do?" I looked at the microphone, at the console, at the clock, which now read 11:56 p.m., 4 minutes to my scheduled sign-off, and I made a decision that would change everything. I flipped the switch that connected the emergency broadcast system, the one that overrode every frequency in the Tri-County area, the one that could interrupt televisions, radios, even some cell phones. "Maggie, get on the secondary console. I need you to monitor everything. Police scanners, emergency frequencies, the works. If anything else comes through, I want to know about it." "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to tell them the truth." I leaned into the microphone, took a deep breath, and began to speak. "Good evening, Tri-County. This is Frank Morrison from WKRL-AM. I know it's late, and I know you're probably in bed, but I'm asking you to wake up your families and listen to what I'm about to tell you." I paused, trying to gather my thoughts, trying to find the words that would make people understand the gravity of what was happening. "I'm going to be breaking every broadcasting rule in the book tonight. I'm going to talk about things that sound like they belong in a horror movie, but I need you to trust me. I need you to believe what I'm telling you, because your lives may depend on it." Outside, through the walls of the studio, I heard something, a distant sound, growing closer, a rumble, almost, like distant thunder, but the sky was clear. I checked the weather report an hour ago. "There's been a series of incidents across the county over the past few days," I continued, forcing myself to stay calm, stay measured. "Incidents that the authorities have been trying to keep quiet. People attacked, drained of blood, victims who were pronounced dead but somehow got up and walked away. Hospital morgues reporting empty drawers and security footage showing the dead simply leaving." The rumble grew louder. Maggie was staring at the studio windows, her face a mask of terror. "Frank," she whispered, "look." I turned. Through the gap in the blinds, I could see the street outside. The fog had thickened, become almost solid, but I could make out shapes moving within it. Dozens of them, hundreds maybe, all moving with the same slow, deliberate gait, all heading in the same direction, toward the radio station, toward the radio station. "I don't know what's causing this," I said, my voice shaking despite my best efforts. "I don't know if it's a disease, or some kind of radiation, or something we don't have words for yet, but I know it's spreading. I know it's making people into something else, something that looks human but isn't, something that craves blood." The shapes in the fog reached the building's entrance. I could hear them now, through the walls, a low, collective moan that seemed to vibrate through the foundations. "Listen to me carefully," I said, speaking faster now, trying to get the information out before it was too late. "If you're in a house, lock your doors, barricade your windows, cover them with blankets, with sheets, with anything that blocks out light. The victims, the infected, they hate light. They're afraid of it. Sunlight seems to burn them. It's the only weakness I've been able to identify." The moaning grew louder. Something heavy slammed against the studio's main door. "Frank, they're breaking through," Maggie shouted. I looked at her, at the terror in her eyes, and I made another decision. "Maggie, get to the emergency exit. The tunnel that leads to the basement. Go. Don't wait for me." "What about you?" "I'll be right behind you. I just need to finish this broadcast." She hesitated for a moment, then nodded and ran. I turned back to the microphone. "I don't know how long I'll be able to stay on the air. The building is under attack, but I promise you this. I'll keep broadcasting as long as I can. I'll tell you everything I know. I'll tell you how to survive." The main door splintered. Through the window, I could see them. A wall of figures, their faces slack, their eyes glittering with something that wasn't quite human. "I'm going to move to the basement studio. If the signal goes dead, wait. I'll come back. I promise I'll come back." I reached for the emergency exit door, but before I could open it, I glanced back at the console. The interference meter was pegged at maximum. The rhythmic pulse had become a constant drone, and rising above it, I could hear those voices again, clearer than before. "The sky opens, and the blood-red light descends, and all who see it shall be remade, and the dead shall inherit the earth." And then I noticed something else, something that made my blood run cold. The clock on the studio wall had stopped. It was frozen at 11:59 p.m. The minute hand was stuck, quivering, as if something was preventing it from completing its final revolution. The top of the hour was approaching, and somehow, impossibly, time itself seemed to be waiting. "Frank, come on!" Maggie's voice echoed from the emergency exit tunnel. "They're almost through." I grabbed the handheld recorder from my desk, a backup device, battery-powered, independent of the main systems, and shoved it into my pocket. Then I ran. The tunnel was dark, lit only by emergency strips along the floor. I could hear Maggie ahead of me, her footsteps echoing off the concrete walls. Behind me, I heard the door splinter and crash open, followed by the sound of many feet, shuffling, dragging, entering the studio. "The basement," I shouted to Maggie. "Get to the basement." We descended 2 flights of stairs, our footsteps echoing like gunshots in the confined space. At the bottom, I pulled the heavy steel door shut behind us and threw the deadbolt. The basement studio was smaller than the main booth, a cramped space used for backup recordings and the occasional overnight automation. But it had its own power supply, its own generator, its own communications equipment, and it had something else, a reinforced door, steel-lined, with a sliding peephole that I'd installed myself after a particularly bad storm had flooded the lower level. "Are we safe?" Maggie asked, her voice shaking. "Safe is a relative term," I said, moving to the console and powering it up. "But we're protected, for now." I set up the recorder, connected it to the transmitter, and began to broadcast again, this time on the emergency frequency. "This is Frank Morrison. I'm broadcasting from the basement studio of Jew Carl AM. The main building has been breached. I don't know how many of them there are, but I know they're not stopping. I know they're going to keep coming." I paused, listening. Through the concrete walls, I could hear them above us, moving through the building, searching. Their footsteps were slow, deliberate. They weren't in a hurry. They knew we were here. I'm going to continue reporting, I said. I'm going to tell you everything I know about what's happening, but I need you to understand. This is not a drill. This is not a hoax. This is real, and it's happening right now, all around you. I took a deep breath, and then I began to tell them the story. The story of the calls, the reports, the strange occurrences that had been building for days. The story of a woman whose dead husband came back to stand in her backyard. The story of a morgue attendant who quit his job after seeing a corpse sit up and smile at him. The story of a police officer who watched a colleague get torn apart by a crowd of people who should have been dead. And as I spoke, the rhythmic pulse in the static grew louder, more insistent, as if it was trying to drown me out, as if it was trying to prevent me from telling the truth. But I kept talking. I kept broadcasting, because I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that the people listening might be the only ones left, and the only way any of us were going to survive was if we knew what we were facing. The basement studio had been soundproofed for a different purpose, to keep outside noise from bleeding into recordings. Now, that same insulation worked in reverse, muffling the sounds of the infected moving through the building above us. But I could still hear them, a constant shuffling footfall, the occasional thud as something heavy was knocked over, and underneath it all, that low, collective moan that seemed to vibrate through the very concrete. Maggie had wedged herself into the corner of the room, her knees pulled up to her chest, her eyes fixed on the steel door. She hadn't spoken since we'd barricaded ourselves in. I couldn't blame her. I'd seen the same look on soldiers' faces when I'd done my time embedded with a combat unit in the desert. It was the look of someone whose mind was struggling to reconcile what their eyes had just witnessed. I kept broadcasting. And that's what I know so far, I said into the microphone, my voice hoarse from nearly an hour of continuous talking. The victims, the infected, they're not just attacking randomly. There's a pattern to it. They're drawn to places with people. To homes, to hospitals, to shelters. They're looking for us. I paused, listening to the rhythmic pulse that still bled through the static. It had grown louder since we'd gone underground, more insistent. I could almost make out words now, individual phrases buried beneath the interference. They're communicating, I said slowly, the realization dawning on me as I spoke. The infected, they're communicating with each other, not through words, not through sounds, through some kind of frequency, a signal that they all share. That's what I've been hearing in the static. That's the pulse. Maggie looked up at me, her eyes wide. What are you saying? I'm saying this isn't random. This isn't just a disease or a mutation or some kind of radiation poisoning. This is organized. This is coordinated. They know what they're doing, and they're working together. I turned back to the microphone, my heart pounding. Listen to me, everyone. If you're hearing this, you need to understand something crucial. The infected are not mindless. They're not just acting on instinct. They have a plan, and that plan is to find us, to convert us, to spread whatever this is to as many people as possible. Incredible. The steel door rattled in its frame. Something, was testing it from the other side. Maggie let out a small, strangled sound. I held up a hand, signaling her to stay quiet. Stay calm, I whispered. That door is solid steel. It'll hold. The rattling stopped. For a moment, there was silence. And then, from the other side of the door, a voice spoke. Frank? Frank? Is that you in there? I froze. The voice was familiar. Too familiar. It was Carol, the station manager, the woman who'd hired me 17 years ago, who'd trusted me with her grandfather's radio station, who'd become something like a second mother to me. Frank, please, you have to let me in. They got me, Frank. They bit me, and I ran, and I made it to the basement, but they're coming, and I need you to open the door. Don't, Maggie hissed. Frank, don't you dare. I stared at the door, my hand hovering over the deadbolt. Carol's voice was perfect. The same warm tone, the same slight southern drawl, the same way she stretched out my name like a comfort. Frank, please. I can hear them. They're coming down the stairs. Please, Frank, please. It's not her, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. It can't be her. Then how does it sound so much like her? Maggie demanded. I had no answer to that, but I knew. with a certainty that came from the depths of my gut that the thing on the other side of the door was not Carol. Carol had been in the main building when they breached. I'd seen her through the window, standing in the control room, her face slack and her eyes glittering with that inhuman light. "Carol," I said through the door, "prove it's you. Tell me something only you would know." There was a pause. Then Carol's voice came again, this time a little less sure. "What do you mean, Frank? You know it's me. You know my voice. Tell me the name of your grandson, the one who died. Tell me what he called you." Silence stretched out like a held breath, and then, slowly, the voice on the other side of the door changed. The warmth drained out of it. The southern drawl flattened into something cold, empty, wrong. "Carol's grandson called her Nana," the voice said. "He died in a car accident 3 years ago. Carol blamed herself because she was supposed to be watching him that day." "How do you know that?" I breathed. "We know everything now. Carol is part of us. Her memories are ours. Her voice is ours. And soon, Frank, your voice will be ours too." The voice changed again, becoming a chorus. Dozens of voices layered on top of each other, all speaking in perfect unison. "Open the door, Frank. Join us. Become part of something greater. Stop hiding. Stop fighting. The world is changing, and you can either change with it or be swept away." I stepped back from the door, my hand falling away from the deadbolt. Maggie was crying now, silent tears streaming down her face. "We're not opening the door," I said, my voice shaking. "We're never opening the door." "That's what they all say," the chorus replied. "But hunger always wins. The body needs blood to survive. And your body, Frank, is full of it." The voices faded away, replaced once again by that low, collective moan. The footsteps retreated, moving back up the stairs. For now, at least, they were leaving. I sagged against the console, suddenly exhausted. The clock on the wall showed 1:08 a.m. We'd been in the basement for just over an hour, but it felt like days. "We need to get out of here," Maggie said, wiping her eyes. "They'll be back. They'll figure out a way to get through the door." "I know." I forced myself to straighten up, to think clearly. "There's an emergency exit, a tunnel that leads to the old maintenance shed behind the building. I don't know if it's still clear, but it's worth a shot." I gathered what I could: the handheld recorder, flashlight, a first aid kit, a few bottles of water from the emergency supply. Maggie grabbed a crowbar that had been left behind by the maintenance crew. We moved to the back wall of the basement, where a narrow door led to the tunnel system. The lock had rusted over, but with the crowbar and some effort, we managed to force it open. The tunnel stretched out before us, dark and narrow. The air was thick with dust and the smell of old concrete. I clicked on the flashlight and stepped inside. "Stay close to me," I said, "and stay quiet." We moved through the tunnel in silence, our footsteps echoing off the walls. The flashlight beam cut through the darkness, illuminating decades of grime and neglect. This tunnel had been built during the Cold War, part of a network of underground passages that crisscrossed the county. I'd only used it once before, during a training exercise with the local emergency management office. After what felt like an eternity, we reached the end. A steel ladder led up to a manhole cover, which I could see was rusted shut. I climbed the ladder and pushed against it, but it wouldn't budge. "Let me try," Maggie said. She squeezed past me on the ladder, braced her shoulders against the cover, and heaved. The cover groaned and then slid aside, letting in a blast of cold air. We emerged into a small maintenance shed, its windows boarded up, its interior filled with old equipment and discarded parts. Through the gaps in the boards, I could see the street outside. The fog had lifted somewhat, revealing a scene of utter chaos. Cars were abandoned in the middle of the road, their doors hanging open. Streetlights flickered and died, their bulbs shattered or broken. And everywhere, there were figures, hundreds of them, standing perfectly still, staring up at the sky. I looked up and felt my blood run cold. The aurora was still visible, but it had changed. What had once been a shimmering curtain of green and purple was now a deep, pulsing red. It moved like something alive, writhing and twisting across the sky, shedding waves of crimson light that seemed to cast the entire world in blood. "That's not natural," Maggie whispered. "Frank, that's not natural." "I know." I watched the figures in the street. They were all facing the same direction, all staring up at the red aurora with expressions of rapturous devotion. Their mouths were open, and I could see that some of them were whispering, their lips moving in perfect synchronization. "They're worshiping it," I said. "Whatever that thing is, they're worshiping it." I pulled out the handheld recorder and pressed the record button. "This is Frank Morrison, broadcasting from the maintenance shed behind the W. Crawl AM building. The infected have taken over the streets. They're standing in the open, not moving, just watching the sky. There's some kind of phenomenon happening up there, an aurora, but not like any I've ever seen. It's red, blood red, and it seems to be drawing them." I lowered the recorder and watched the figures. They hadn't noticed us yet. They were too focused on the sky. "We need to move," I said, "while they're distracted. There's a safe house about a mile from here, a hunting cabin owned by one of the station's former sponsors. It's stocked with supplies. It's isolated. We can make it if we're careful." Maggie nodded, her face pale but determined. We crept out of the shed, staying low, moving from shadow to shadow. The streets were silent except for the sound of our own breathing and the soft whispers of the infected. I could see them everywhere, in doorways, on street corners, standing in the middle of the road. Their eyes were fixed on the aurora, their faces slack and empty. But as we moved, I noticed something strange. One of the figures near the gas station across the street was different from the others. It was smaller, slighter, and it was moving. Not with the slow, shuffling gait of the infected, but with purpose, with intent. It was coming toward us. "Frank," Maggie hissed, "look." I saw it too. The figure was crossing the street, moving faster now, closing the distance between us. "Run," I said. We ran. The figure chased us, its footsteps unnervingly light, its breath coming in soft, rhythmic gasps. I glanced back and saw that it was a woman, young, maybe in her 20s, with dark hair and wide, haunted eyes. "Please," she called out, "please don't run. I'm not like them. I'm still me. I'm still human." I stopped. Against every instinct I had, I stopped and turned to face her. She was standing in the middle of the street, her hands raised in surrender. Her face was pale, but her eyes were human, terrified, desperate, but human. "Please," she said again. "I've been hiding for days. I've been running for days. I don't know what's happening. I don't know what's going on. Please, I just want to live." Maggie tugged at my arm. "Frank, we can't trust her. We don't know anything about her." The woman took a step forward, then another. "I'm not infected. I swear to you. I've been careful. I've been so careful. I haven't been bitten. I haven't been touched. I've just been hiding." She was close enough now that I could see the details of her face, the dark circles under her eyes, the dried blood on her clothes. Someone else's, she'd said. Someone who hadn't made it. The way her hands trembled as she held them out to me. "Can you help me?" she asked. "Please?" I looked at Maggie. She was staring at the woman, her expression conflicted. "We can't just leave her," I said, "if she's telling the truth. Frank, we don't know that." I turned back to the woman. "What's your name?" "Sarah. Sarah Miller. I was a nurse at the county hospital. I was on duty when it started, when the patients started changing. Tell me what you saw," I said. "Tell me everything." Sarah's face crumpled. It was the blood. The patients who had received transfusions, they were the first to change. Their bodies started rejecting the blood. But then something else happened. The rejection became absorption. The blood started changing them, making them into something else. I felt a chill run down my spine. A transfusion. Yes, and then it started spreading. The changed patients, they started attacking the staff. It was like a chain reaction. One bite, one scratch, and the infection spread. "Where are you going?" I asked. "Anywhere, away from here. Away from them. I just need to survive." I made a decision. "Come with us. We have a safe house a mile from here. But if you show any sign of infection, any sign at all, I won't hesitate to leave you behind." Sarah nodded, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you. Thank you so much." We began to move again, the three of us now, staying close to the shadows. The infected were still focused on the aurora, still whispering their synchronized prayers. But as we passed a narrow alley, I saw something that stopped me cold. One of the infected had turned away from the sky. It was standing in the darkness, its eyes fixed on us, and on its face was something I hadn't seen on any of the others. A smile. A knowing, hungry smile. "We've been seen," I whispered. "Run." We bolted down the alley, the sound of pursuit echoing behind us. The infected were faster than I'd expected, their movements unnaturally fluid, their footsteps almost silent. "There's a door," Maggie shouted. "On the left, the hardware store." We crashed through the door and slammed it shut behind us. I threw the deadbolt and pressed my back against the wood, my heart hammering in my chest. Something slammed against the other side, then another and another. The door shuddered but held. "Back door," Sarah said. "There's a back door. I remember this place. I used to shop here." We stumbled through the darkened store, knocking over displays and tripping over debris. The back door was locked, but it was old. The wood rotted around the frame. I put my shoulder to it and pushed. It gave way with a groan. We emerged into an alley that ran behind a row of buildings. The aurora was brighter here, the red light casting everything in shades of blood and shadow. "We need to find a vehicle," I said. "Anything. We need to get out of this part of town." Up ahead, I spotted a sedan abandoned in the middle of the alley, its keys still in the ignition. I ran to it and tried to start the engine, but the battery was dead. "Try the next one," Maggie said. We moved down the alley, checking each car we passed. Most were locked, their owners long gone. But finally, we found a pickup truck with its windows smashed and its engine cold. I opened the door, relieved to find a standard transmission. "Stay low," I said, "and keep your eyes open." We drove through the abandoned streets, weaving around obstacles and trying to stay out of sight. The infected were still standing in the streets, still staring at the sky, but there were more of them now, hundreds of them, maybe thousands. They seemed to be gathering in larger groups, drawn together by something I couldn't see. "Frank," Maggie said, her voice shaking. "Look." She pointed ahead, toward a bridge that led out of town. The bridge was covered in figures, their silhouettes dark against the red-lit sky. They were standing in rows, shoulder to shoulder, blocking the road. "Turn around," I said. "We'll try another route." But there was no other route. Every road leading out of town was blocked by the same silent, unmoving figures. They weren't attacking. They weren't even moving. They were just waiting. "They're containing us," Sarah said. "They want to keep us in the city. They want to keep us from escaping." I looked at the figures on the bridge, at the thousands more I could see in the distance, and I realized she was right. We were trapped. "This is the Exodus," I said quietly. "This is how they spread. They let the survivors leave, and the survivors carry the infection with them. But they're not ready for that yet. They need to consolidate first. They need to convert the city before they move on to the rest of the world." I pulled the truck into a narrow alley and killed the engine. We sat in silence, listening to the distant murmurs of the infected, watching the red light pulse across the sky. "So what do we do?" Sarah asked. I didn't have an answer. And for the first time, I wondered if we had already lost. "Get some rest," I said. "We'll figure out our next move at dawn." I leaned back in the seat, my eyes still fixed on the figures in the distance. The aurora pulsed above us, its crimson light casting long shadows that seemed to dance and writhe. Somewhere out there, the infected were moving through the city, gathering souls for their terrible purpose. And in the static of my abandoned broadcast, I could still hear them whispering, "The dead shall inherit the earth." The words echoed in my mind, repeating again and again, a mantra that I couldn't shake. For a long time, I just sat there, staring at nothing, trying to find the strength to keep going. Then I heard something else. A voice, barely above a whisper, coming from the handheld recorder I'd left on the dashboard. "Frank? Frank, are you there?" I sat up, grabbing the recorder. The voice was faint, crackling with interference, but unmistakable. "Frank, it's Dale. From the dispatch center. I'm still here. I found a way to reach you." I pressed the record button with trembling hands. "Dale, how are you doing this? How are you getting through?" "Don't ask," he said, his voice strained. "I don't have time. I found something. A way to stop them. A weakness." "What is it?" "Water. Running water. They can't cross it. I don't know why, but the infection seems to short-circuit when they're exposed to moving water. Maybe it's the electrical charge, maybe it's something else, but it works. The pieces began to fall into place in my mind. There's a river, I said, the Millbrook River. It cuts through the southern part of the city. If we can get to it, cross it, we might be able to escape. I'll try to keep them distracted, Dale said. I've been broadcasting on the emergency frequency, drawing them to me. But Frank, I can't keep this up for much longer. They're coming. They've breached the building. I don't have much time. Dale, get out of there. Just get out. I can't, Frank. The building is surrounded. But I can keep broadcasting for a few more minutes. That should give you enough time to reach the river. I looked at Maggie and Sarah, both of them watching me with wide, frightened eyes. Frank, Dale's voice came again, weaker now. I need you to know something. When you get out, when you survive, remember who you are. Remember why you're fighting. The world is still worth saving. It's still worth fighting for. And then, with a crackle of static, his voice was gone. I sat there for a long moment, the silence pressing in on me. Then I started the engine and pulled out of the alley. Where are we going? Maggie asked. To the river, I said. Dale gave us a window. We have to take it. We drove through the abandoned streets, the red light of the aurora casting everything in a sinister glow. The infected were everywhere now, their numbers swelling, but many of them were moving, heading toward the sounds of Dale's broadcast, giving us a clear path to the river. I drove faster, pushing the truck to its limits. The bridge was ahead, and beyond it the river. Freedom. But as I approached the bridge, I saw that it was covered in figures, hundreds of them blocking the way. They were waiting for us. They knew what we were trying to do. Brace yourselves, I said, and floored the accelerator. The truck slammed into the crowd of infected, sending bodies flying. I couldn't see where I was going. All I could see was a mass of faces, of hands reaching for us, of glittering eyes and hungry mouths. The truck lurched and shrieked, metal screaming against flesh and bone. And then, suddenly, we were through. I slammed on the brakes, the truck skidding to a stop at the edge of the riverbank. The water was dark, churning, moving fast. I had no idea how deep it was, no idea if we could cross it. Out of the truck, I shouted. We're wading across. We splashed into the freezing water, the current pulling at our legs, threatening to sweep us away. The infected poured onto the riverbank, their eyes fixed on us, their mouths open in silent screams. But they didn't follow. They stopped at the water's edge, their feet just inches from the current. They couldn't cross. Dale had been right. We waded to the opposite bank, soaking wet and shivering, our lungs burning with cold, and as we climbed out of the water, I looked back at the city we'd left behind. The infected were still there, standing on the riverbank, watching us with eyes that held no humanity. And in the sky above them, the red aurora pulsed and writhed, its light spreading like a cancer across the heavens. But we were free. We had made it out. I collapsed to my knees, the water dripping from my clothes, and I let out a sob of relief. Maggie and Sarah collapsed beside me, their bodies shaking with cold and exhaustion. For a long time, we just stayed there, catching our breath, trying to process what we'd just been through. And then, far in the distance, I heard it again. The same rhythmic pulse, the same whispers, the same voices, rising and falling like a chorus of the damned. The sky opens, they whispered, and the blood-red light descends, and all who see it shall be remade, and the dead shall inherit the earth. But this time, I heard something else in their words, something I hadn't noticed before. A hope, a promise, a warning for anyone who would listen. Resist the call, the word said. Remember who you are. Remember why you fight. The dawn will come. The dawn will always come. Dawn came slowly, reluctantly, as if the sun itself was afraid to rise. I sat on the riverbank, my clothes still damp, watching the eastern sky transition from black to deep purple to a bruised, sickly gray. The red aurora had faded with the approaching light, but its memory lingered in the clouds, a faint blush of crimson that refused to fully dissipate. Maggie was asleep beside me, her head resting on a moss-covered rock, her breathing shallow but steady. Sarah had found a fallen log and was sitting on it, her arms wrapped around her knees, staring at the river with hollow eyes. We'd survived the night. But survival, I was learning, was not the same as living. We need to find shelter, I said, my voice hoarse. We need food, dry clothes, medical supplies. We can't stay here. Sarah looked up at me, her expression vacant. Where do we go? I thought about that. The hunting cabin I'd mentioned earlier was on the other side of the river, but that was where the infected were gathering. We have to find another route, another destination. There's a town about 10 miles south of here, I said. Maple Grove. Small, isolated. If we can make it there, we might find supplies, maybe even other survivors. 10 miles, Maggie murmured, stirring from her sleep. We'll be exposed the entire time. I know, but we don't have a choice. I stood up, my joints protesting. The cold had settled into my bones, making every movement painful. I helped Maggie to her feet, then offered a hand to Sarah. She took it, and I felt the tremor in her fingers, the same tremor I'd noticed the night before, the same tremor I'd chosen to ignore. I stepped back, studying her face. Sarah, are you feeling okay? She blinked, confusion flickering across her features. Yes, I think so. I'm just tired, and cold, and scared. I didn't say anything. I didn't have to. We both knew what I was really asking. I'm fine, Frank. I swear. I haven't been bitten. I haven't been touched. But there was something in her eyes, a flicker of something that hadn't been there before. A faint glitter, like the reflection of a distant star. I pushed the thought aside. I had to trust her. We couldn't survive alone. We began to walk, following the river south. The terrain was rough, dotted with boulders and fallen trees, but it provided cover. We stayed close to the water's edge, using the river as a barrier between us and whatever might be lurking in the woods. The morning passed in silence. The sun rose higher, its light thin and watery, casting long shadows that seemed to reach for us like grasping fingers. Birds sang in the trees, their songs unnaturally loud in the quiet. It was as if the world was holding its breath, waiting for something. Around noon, we reached a small clearing. In the center stood a crumbling stone structure, the remains of an old mill, its water wheel long since rotted away. The roof had collapsed in places, but the walls were still standing. We can rest here, I said. Get out of the open for a while. We made our way inside, navigating through the debris. The interior was dark and musty, but it was dry. I found a relatively intact corner, and we settled in, sharing the last of the water from my pack. You should try to eat something, I said to Sarah. You look pale. She shook her head. I'm not hungry. When's the last time you ate? I don't know. A day? 2 days? I've lost track. I dug through my pack and found a granola bar, the last of my emergency supplies. I held it out to her. Eat. She took it, but didn't open it. She just stared at it, her expression distant. Maggie was watching her too, I noticed. Her eyes were narrowed, her mouth set in a thin line. Frank, she said quietly, can I talk to you for a moment? We moved to the other side of the mill, where Sarah couldn't hear us. There's something wrong with her, Maggie said. I can feel it. There's something wrong. Maggie, she's traumatized. We're all traumatized. This is different. I can't explain it, but I can feel it, like something's buzzing inside her, like a low hum. I can hear it when I stand close to her. I looked at Sarah, still sitting in the corner, the unopened granola bar in her hands. She looked so fragile, so young, so human. She's just scared, I said. We're all scared. But even as I said the words, I remembered the tremor in her fingers, the glitter in her eyes, the way she'd said, I'm not hungry, with such absolute conviction. We stayed in the mill for another hour, resting, regaining our strength. I fell into a light doze, my back against the stone wall, my ears straining for any sound that might signal danger. I woke to the sound of footsteps, light, careful footsteps, moving toward the entrance of the mill. I reached for the crowbar I'd taken from the maintenance shed, my heart pounding. Maggie, I whispered, wake up. She stirred, her eyes snapping open. What is it? Someone's coming. We pressed ourselves against the wall, peering through a gap in the stones. Outside, a figure was approaching the mill. A man, tall and gaunt, his clothes torn and dirty. He moved with a slow, cautious gait, his eyes scanning the area. Stay here, I whispered. I'm going to see who it is. I crept to the entrance, the crowbar held ready. The man saw me and froze. his hands going up in surrender. "Please," he said. "I'm not infected. I'm not one of them. I'm just trying to survive." He was older than me, maybe in his 60s, with white hair and a face lined with worry. His hands were shaking, and there was a fresh wound on his arm, poorly bandaged with a strip of torn fabric. "How do I know you're not infected?" I asked. He looked at me, his eyes wild with desperation. "You don't, but I can prove it. I found something. Something that might save us." "What?" He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, sealed container. Inside was a vial of clear liquid. "This is it," he said. "A vaccine, or a cure. I'm not sure which, but it works. It stops the infection." I saw it with my own eyes. I stared at the vial, my mind racing. "Where did you get this?" "From the research facility, about 20 miles north of here. I worked there as a security guard. When the outbreak started, the scientists were working on a countermeasure. They had just finished the first batch when the facility was overrun. I grabbed what I could and ran." "Let me see it." He handed me the vial. It was cool to the touch, the liquid inside perfectly clear. I held it up to the light, examining it. "How many people have you given this to?" "Only one. A woman I found in the woods, barely conscious. She'd been bitten, but when I gave her the vaccine, she started to improve. She wasn't hungry for blood. She didn't change. She stayed human." "Where is she now?" "She died, not from the infection, from the wounds. They were too severe, but she didn't change. She stayed human until the end." I turned the vial over in my hands. It could be a lie, it could be a trap, but it could also be the only hope we had. "Frank," Maggie said from behind me. "Look." She was pointing at Sarah, who had risen from her corner and was approaching the stranger. Her eyes were fixed on him with an intensity that made me uneasy. "Where did you find this?" she asked, her voice flat. The man took a step back, his face paling. "I told you, the research facility. Liar," Sarah said. "I can see it, in your mind. You don't know anything about a vaccine. You're lying." The man's face contorted. "I'm not lying. I swear to God, I'm not lying." Sarah lunged at him, and before I could react, she had him by the throat. He struggled, gasping for air, but she was too strong, much stronger than she should have been. "Sarah, stop," I shouted, grabbing her arm. She threw me aside like I was a child. I crashed into the wall, the impact driving the air from my lungs. The man was turning purple, his eyes bulging. I scrambled to my feet, searching for something to use. The crowbar was on the ground, near Sarah's feet. I grabbed it and swung it with all my strength. It connected with her shoulder, not hard enough to break bone, but hard enough to make her release her grip. She spun around, her eyes blazing with an inhuman light. "Frank," she said, her voice a chorus of overlapping voices. "You shouldn't have done that." And then she smiled. Not Sarah's smile, something else, something ancient and hungry and terrible. "What did you do to her?" I demanded. "We didn't do anything," the chorus replied. "She chose. She accepted. She saw the truth and embraced it." "No, you're lying." "I don't lie, Frank. I don't need to. The truth is written in the blood that flows through all of us, the blood that connects us, the blood that will unite us." She took a step toward me, and I raised the crowbar. "You won't hit me with that," she said. "You're a good man, Frank, a kind man. That's why you won't survive. That's why you'll never understand." "Understand what?" "Understand that this is not the end. This is the beginning. The world is being remade, and you can either be part of it or be swept away." She lunged at me again, and this time I was ready. I swung the crowbar at her knees, and she went down, her legs buckling beneath her. Maggie was there, pulling me away. "Frank, come on. We have to go. Now." We ran, leaving Sarah behind. She was still on the floor, her body convulsing as the thing inside her fought for control. As we burst through the doorway, I heard her voice, not the chorus, but Sarah's voice, broken and desperate. "Frank, please, help me. It's in my head. I can feel it. It's eating me from the inside. Please, help me. I don't want to become one of them. Please." I stopped, my heart breaking. "Maggie, I can't. There's nothing you can do for her, Frank. She's already gone. The woman you were trying to save is already gone." I looked back at Sarah, still convulsing on the floor. Her eyes had changed again. becoming that inhuman glitter, but there was a tear on her cheek, a single tear rolling down her face. "Please," she whispered, "remember me. Remember who I was." And then the chorus took over, and she said nothing else. We ran. We ran until my lungs burned and my legs gave out. We collapsed behind a fallen tree, gasping for air, our bodies trembling with exhaustion. "How did she change so fast?" Maggie asked. "You said it takes hours, days, but she was normal this morning. We would have seen it. We would have known." I shook my head. "I don't know. Maybe she was infected before we met her. Maybe she was already changing when she found us, and it was just taking longer because she was fighting it. Or maybe it's getting faster. Maybe the infection is evolving." That thought was more terrifying than anything I'd seen so far. If the infected were evolving, adapting, getting smarter and stronger and faster, then we didn't stand a chance. "We have to find more information," I said. "We have to know what we're dealing with. There's no one left who can tell us. The city is gone. The research facility is gone. We're all we've got." I thought about the man we'd left behind at the mill. The man who'd claimed to have a vaccine. He'd been lying, but he'd also been a survivor. He'd known about the research facility. He'd known something. "Maybe he wasn't lying," I said slowly. "Maybe there really is a vaccine. Or at least, maybe there are people working on one." "Frank, we can't go back there. It's too dangerous." "I'm not talking about going back. I'm talking about finding the research facility, finding out what the scientists were doing. Maybe we can pick up where they left off." Maggie stared at me like I was insane. "You want to go to the source of the outbreak? The place where it all started? It's also the place where they might have found a way to stop it." We sat in silence for a long moment. The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the forest floor. Somewhere in the distance, I could hear the sound of a bird singing, a simple, beautiful sound that seemed at odds with everything we'd been through. "You're crazy," Maggie said finally, "but I'm with you." I felt a surge of gratitude. "Thank you. Don't thank me yet. We have to get there first, and we have no idea what's waiting for us." We gathered what little we had and began to move north, following the river. The terrain was difficult, but we made progress. As the sun dipped below the horizon, we found a small cave to shelter in for the night. "We'll move at first light," I said. "We'll make better time during the day when the infected are less active." Maggie nodded, her eyes already closing. I watched her drift off to sleep, her face peaceful despite everything we'd been through. I stayed awake, keeping watch. The night was quiet, almost peaceful. The aurora was gone, and in its place, a sky full of stars. I stared up at them, trying to find comfort in their familiarity, but I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched, that somewhere in the darkness, something was waiting for us, something patient, something hungry. I reached for the handheld recorder. Still in my pocket, I pressed the record button and began to speak, my voice barely above a whisper. "This is Frank Morrison. It's been 2 days since the outbreak began. We've lost everything. Our homes, our friends, our way of life. But we're still alive. We're still fighting." I paused, gathering my thoughts. "We're heading north, to the research facility where this all began. We're hoping to find a cure, a vaccine, anything that might give us a chance to fight back. I don't know what we'll find there. Maybe nothing. Maybe worse than nothing. But we have to try." I stopped the recording and put the device away. For a long time, I just sat there, watching the stars, listening to the silence. And then, just before dawn, I heard it again. The same rhythmic pulse, the same whispers, the same chorus of voices, rising and falling like a prayer. But this time, there was something different about it, something I hadn't noticed before. Beneath the chorus, beneath the whispers, there was a single voice, a voice I recognized. "Frank," it said. "Frank, can you hear me?" It was Dale, from the dispatch center, the man who'd sacrificed himself so we could escape. "You're dead," I whispered. "I heard them get you. I heard you die." "I am dead," the voice replied, "but I'm also something else. Something more. The infection doesn't just take your memories, Frank. It takes your consciousness. It takes your soul, and it keeps you alive, forever." "Dale, what have they done to you?" "I can't fight it, Frank. I don't have the will, but I can still see. I can still hear. I can still warn you." "Warn me about what?" "About what's coming." The infection isn't just spreading, it's evolving. It's learning, and it's learning from everyone it consumes. Every scientist, every doctor, every military strategist. They all become part of it. They all contribute to it. I felt a chill run down my spine. So it's getting smarter, much smarter, and it has a plan. A plan that goes far beyond just converting people. What kind of plan? The voice paused, crackling with static. I can't tell you, not directly. They'll know. They'll shut me down. But I can tell you this. Find the research facility. Find what they were working on. It's the only chance we have. Dale, wait. How do I find it? How do I? But the voice was gone, replaced by the rhythmic pulse. I sat in the darkness, my mind racing. Dale had given me a mission, a purpose, but he'd also given me something else. Hope. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt like we had a chance. A real chance. I woke Maggie at first light, and we began to move. The research facility was somewhere in the forest, 20 miles to the north. We had supplies for maybe 2 more days. We had no weapons except a crowbar and a hunting knife. But we had hope, and that would have to be enough. As we walked, I told Maggie about Dale's message. She listened in silence, her face grim but determined. He's right, she said when I finished. We have to find that facility. Whatever they were working on, it's our only hope. What about the vaccine? I asked. The man at the mill said there was a vaccine. He was lying. Sarah sensed it. She felt it in his mind. Or maybe he was telling the truth, and Sarah just wanted us to think he was lying. Maybe she was trying to protect the infection, to keep us from finding a cure. Maggie considered that. It's possible, but we don't know for sure. We'll know more when we reach the facility. We walked for hours, the forest slowly giving way to hills and rocky outcroppings. The sun climbed higher, its light thin and pale. The birds had fallen silent, and the only sound was the crunch of our footsteps on the forest floor. Around noon, we came across a road, a narrow, winding road that led into the hills. There were signs of recent travel, tire tracks, footprints, scattered debris. Someone else has been here, I said. Maybe survivors, maybe the infected. Either way, we need to be careful. We followed the road, staying close to the tree line. After another mile, we saw it, a massive complex of buildings, surrounded by a chain-link fence topped with razor wire. The research facility. The gate was open, the fence breached in several places. Beyond it, I could see bodies, dozens of them, some in uniforms, some in lab coats, all of them dead. Keep your eyes open, I said. We don't know what's inside. We crept through the gate, stepping over the bodies. The main building was a large, windowless structure, its concrete walls stained with blood and grime. The door was hanging on its hinges, torn open from the inside. We entered the building and found ourselves in a vast lobby. The reception desk had been overturned, its contents scattered across the floor. The walls were covered in spray-painted symbols, strange, angular symbols that I didn't recognize. What is this? Maggie asked. I don't know. Some kind of message. Maybe from the infected. Maybe from the survivors. I studied the symbols, trying to make sense of them. They seemed almost like a language, but one I'd never seen before. I think they're warning us, I said slowly. I think they're telling us to leave. Are we going to? I looked at the hallway leading deeper into the facility. It was dark, lit only by flickering emergency lights. Somewhere in the distance, I could hear a sound, a low, rhythmic pulse, like a heartbeat. No, I said. We're not leaving. Not until we find out what they were working on. We moved deeper into the facility, passing through laboratories and offices and storage rooms. Everywhere we went, we saw signs of chaos. Overturned tables, shattered glass, bloodstains on the walls. Finally, we reached what appeared to be the main research lab. It was a large, sterile room filled with equipment, microscopes, centrifuges, racks of test tubes. In the center of the room was a massive computer system, its monitors displaying a complex web of data. Let's see what they were working on, I said, moving to the computer. The system was still running, its hard drives intact. I began to scroll through the files, trying to make sense of the data. What is all this? Maggie asked. It's research. Lots of it. They were studying the infection. They were trying to find a cure. I found a file labeled Project Phoenix. I opened it, and my eyes widened. This is it, I said. This is the vaccine, or rather, the beginnings of one. They identified a protein that inhibits the infection's ability to replicate. They synthesized it in the lab. They tested it on cell cultures. Did it work? I don't know. The data is incomplete. It looks like they were still in the early stages when the facility was overrun. I scrolled further, and my blood ran cold. Wait. There's more. They found something else. What? They found a way to communicate with the infection. A way to talk to it. Talk to it? You mean negotiate with it? Sort of. The infection is a collective consciousness. It's made up of all the minds it has absorbed, and because of that, it has the capacity for reason. It can be reasoned with. Maggie stared at me. Frank, are you saying we can negotiate with the thing that's trying to destroy humanity? I'm saying we have options. Options we didn't know we had. I continued scrolling, searching for anything that might help us, and then I found it. A message. A transmission from the facility to somewhere else. Look at this, I said. They sent a message. They tried to reach the collective. They tried to reason with it. What did they say? I read the message aloud. To the entity controlling the infected, we understand that you are a collective consciousness, a gestalt of many minds. We understand that your goal is to expand, to grow, to evolve. But we ask you to consider what happens when you have consumed everything, when there is no one left to absorb. Your existence is predicated on the existence of uninfected hosts. Without us, you cease to be. You cannot evolve without us, because evolution requires adaptation, and adaptation requires diversity. If you consume all diversity, you consume yourself. I stopped reading, my heart pounding. What happened? Maggie asked. Did they reply? I scrolled down, and there it was, a single line of text, sent in response. Your logic is flawed. We do not consume diversity, we preserve it. Every mind we absorb becomes part of us. Every consciousness we consume lives on, eternal. We offer evolution, not extinction. We offer unity, not division. The choice is yours. Join us and be preserved, or resist and be forgotten. I stared at the message, the words echoing in my mind, and then I heard it again, the rhythmic pulse, louder now, closer. They're here, I said, the infected. They found us. Maggie grabbed my arm. Frank, we have to go now. Wait. I reached for the computer, downloading the data onto a portable drive. We need this. We need to continue their work. If there's even a chance of finding a cure, we have to take it. The pulse grew louder. Through the lab's windows, I could see figures moving in the hallway. Dozens of them. Hundreds, maybe. Frank, Maggie shouted. I've got it. Let's go. We ran through the facility, the infected pouring in behind us. We burst through the back door, into the forest, and we ran. We ran until we couldn't run anymore. When we finally stopped, I collapsed to my knees, gasping for air. Maggie collapsed beside me, her face flushed and sweaty. Did we lose them? She asked. I don't know. I think so. I looked at the drive in my hand, the data, the research, the hope. We have what we need, I said. We have the key to stopping this. Key? Frank, we barely understand what we're dealing with. I know, but we can learn. We have to learn. We rested for a moment, then began to move again. There was a town nearby, I knew. A small town, isolated, with supplies and shelter. This is just the beginning, I said. The nightmare isn't over, but we're still here. We're still fighting, and as long as we're fighting, there's hope. The sun began to set, and in the distance, I could see the aurora rising again. But this time, it was different. The red light had faded, replaced by a deep, pulsing blue. The sky opens, I whispered, and the blue light descends. Frank, Maggie said, her voice trembling. I looked at the sky, at the shifting colors, at the growing light. Something's changed, I said. Something's happened. And deep in my pocket, the recorder began to play a message I hadn't recorded. Frank, Dale's voice said, the infection has evolved. It's adapting. It's learning. And now, it's reaching out. The aurora pulsed, and I felt a strange warmth spreading through my chest. A warmth that was almost welcoming. What's happening to me? I asked. Frank, you need to fight it. You need to resist. It's trying to bring you in. It's trying to make you part of the collective. I can't. The warmth grew stronger, spreading through my limbs. I could hear the voices now, clearer than ever. 1,000 voices, all speaking at once. Join us, Frank. Become part of something greater. Become part of us. And in that moment, I understood. The infection wasn't just a disease, it was a promise. A promise of eternal life. A promise of unity. A promise of everything humanity had ever wanted. But it was a lie. We preserve, the chorus said. We remember, we endure. You consume, I said, my voice barely a whisper. You take, you destroy. The price of evolution is sacrifice. The price of unity is surrender. Then I refuse. I choose to fight. I choose to live. I choose to be human. The warmth faded, replaced by cold. The voices receded, replaced by silence. And in that silence, I understood something I hadn't known before. I wasn't just a survivor. I was a symbol of resistance, a symbol of hope. I reached for the recorder and pressed the record button. This is Frank Morrison, I said, my voice shaking. I'm still here. I'm still fighting, and I'm never going to stop. The dawn would come. The dawn would always come. And when it did, we would be ready. The blue aurora pulsed overhead like a living thing, its light casting an eerie luminescence across the forest. I stood at the edge of a clearing, my body trembling, my mind reeling from what I'd just experienced. The infection had tried to claim me. It had reached into my consciousness, wrapped itself around my thoughts, and whispered promises of unity and eternity. And I had resisted, barely. Maggie was watching me with wide, frightened eyes. Frank, are you okay? I took a shaky breath. I'm fine. I think. You were gone for a minute. Just standing there, staring at nothing. I couldn't get through to you. I could hear them, I said. The voices. They were trying to bring me in, to make me part of the collective. But you fought them off. I don't know how. I thought about everything I'd lost, everything I was fighting for, and I refused to let go. Maggie stepped closer, her hand reaching for mine. You're stronger than you think, Frank. You've always been stronger than you think. I squeezed her hand, drawing strength from her touch. We need to keep moving. The town I mentioned, it's not far from here, maybe an hour's walk. We set out again, navigating through the darkening forest. The blue aurora continued to pulse overhead, its light filtering through the canopy in shifting patterns. The birds had gone silent, and the only sound was the crunch of leaves beneath our feet. As we walked, I found myself thinking about what I'd experienced. The warmth in my chest, the voices in my head, the feeling of being pulled towards something vast and ancient and hungry. It had been almost seductive, the promise of eternal life, of unity, of purpose. For a moment, I'd understood why so many people had surrendered to it, why they'd given up their humanity for the promise of something greater. But I'd also understood something else, something the infection hadn't wanted me to know. It was lonely. The collective consciousness was vast, yes, powerful, yes, but it was also desperately, achingly lonely. It had absorbed countless minds, but it hadn't truly connected with them. It had consumed them, preserved them, but it hadn't loved them. It couldn't love them. Love required individuality, and individuality was the one thing the infection couldn't tolerate. That was its weakness, its fatal flaw. Frank, look, Maggie said, pointing ahead. Through the trees I could see lights, dim, flickering lights like candles or lanterns. The town of Maple Grove. We approached cautiously, staying close to the tree line. The town was small, maybe a few dozen buildings clustered around a central square. The lights we'd seen were coming from the windows of a large building near the center, a church by the look of it. Survivors, I said. They must have taken shelter in the church. We made our way toward the building, keeping to the shadows. As we drew closer, I could see that the church was surrounded by a makeshift barricade. Cars, furniture, debris piled high to keep out intruders. Hello? I called out. Is anyone there? A face appeared at a window, a man, middle-aged, with a rifle in his hands. Who are you? Are you infected? No, we're survivors. We came from the city. We need shelter. The man studied us for a long moment, then disappeared from the window. A moment later, the church door opened a crack. Come in, quickly. We slipped through the door, and the man closed it behind us, throwing several heavy bolts into place. The church was filled with people, dozens of them, huddled together on the pews, their faces drawn and tired. "Welcome to Maple Grove," the man said, "or what's left of it. I'm Pastor Thomas. I'm in charge here." "Frank Morrison," I said. "This is Maggie. We've been running for 2 days." "The city," Pastor Thomas said. "We heard what happened. The reports on the radio. The screams. We knew it was bad, but we didn't know how bad." "Worse than you can imagine," I said. "The infection spread fast, faster than anyone could have predicted. The entire city is gone." Pastor Thomas's face grew grim. "We've been lucky here. We're isolated, off the main roads. The infected haven't found us yet." "They will," I said. "It's only a matter of time. They're organized, they're coordinated, and they're expanding." A murmur rippled through the crowd. People clutched each other tighter, their eyes wide with fear. "We can't stay here," I continued. "We need to find a safe place, somewhere the infected can't reach us." "Where?" Pastor Thomas asked. "There's nowhere left. The whole world is falling apart." "I know a place, a research facility in the mountains. They were working on a cure, a vaccine. We have the data from their research. If we can get there and continue their work, we might have a chance." The people in the church exchanged uncertain glances. Some of them were shaking their heads. Others were staring at the floor, refusing to meet my eyes. "You're asking us to follow you into the mountains," Pastor Thomas said. "Into a place that might be overrun by infected, to look for a cure that might not even exist." "Yes, that's exactly what I'm asking. And if I refuse, if I decide that our best chance is to stay here and pray for deliverance, then you'll die. All of you. The infected will find you, and they'll either kill you or convert you. There's no third option." Silence stretched out like a held breath. Then, slowly, a woman stood up. She was young, maybe in her early 20s, with dark hair and determined eyes. "I'll go with you," she said. "I'm a nurse. I worked at the county hospital. If there's a cure to be found, I want to be part of it." Another person stood up, then another. Within minutes, a dozen volunteers had stepped forward. "Thank you," I said. "Thank you all." "What do we need to do?" the nurse asked. "We need supplies, food, water, medical equipment. We need weapons, if you have them, and we need to move fast. The infected could be here any time." Pastor Thomas sighed. "I'll help you gather what you need, but I can't promise that everyone here will want to come. I understand. The ones who stay will have to make their own choices." We spent the next hour preparing. The volunteers gathered supplies from the surrounding buildings, working quickly and quietly. I checked the data drive I'd taken from the research facility, making sure it was still intact. It was. "We're ready," the nurse said, "but we need to leave now. It's almost dark, and the infected are more active at night." I nodded. "Stay close, stay quiet, and whatever you do, don't let them touch you." We set out, a small group of survivors heading into the unknown. The blue aurora still pulsed overhead, its light casting an eerie glow across the landscape. The forest seemed to close in around us, the trees pressing close like dark sentinels. We walked for hours, following the path I'd mapped from the research facility's data. The terrain grew rougher, the hills steeper, but we pushed on, driven by desperation and hope. Around midnight, we reached the edge of a valley. Below us, I could see the research facility, or what was left of it. The buildings were dark, their windows shattered, their walls scarred by fire and violence. "We're here," I said. "This is where we need to go." "Frank, look," Maggie said, pointing into the valley. The facility's courtyard was filled with figures, hundreds of them, thousands maybe. They were standing motionless, their faces turned up to the sky, their mouths open in silent prayer. "They're here," I said. "They're waiting for us." "How do they know?" the nurse asked. "Because they feel us, they sense us. We're part of the same network, even if we're not connected to it." The figures began to move, slowly at first, then faster, streaming toward us like a flood of darkness. "Run!" I shouted. "Run for the facility." We raced down the hill, the infected pouring after us. The doors of the facility were still hanging open, the entrance clear. We burst through them, into the darkness, and slammed them shut behind us. "They're coming," Maggie said. "We don't have much time." "The lab," I said. We need to get to the lab. It's the only place with the equipment we need. We raced through the facility, navigating the darkened corridors by memory. Behind us, I could hear the infected, the sound of thousands of footsteps, the low, collective moan of their voices. The lab door was closed, but the lock was broken. I threw it open and we piled inside, slamming the door behind us. "Barricade it," I ordered. "Whatever you can find." We moved tables and chairs, anything we could lift, piling them against the door. The infected were at the door now, pounding against it, their fists hammering at the wood. "Frank, what now?" Maggie asked. "What do we do?" "I have the data. I know what they were working on, but I need time to recreate what they were doing." "How much time?" "I don't know. Hours, maybe, days." The door shuddered under the assault. More infected were arriving, their numbers swelling. The barricade was holding, but not for long. "Buy me time," I said. "Keep them away from me." Maggie nodded, her face determined. She grabbed a fire extinguisher and positioned herself by the door, ready to fight. The door splintered, and the infected poured through. What followed was a blur of chaos and terror. I heard screams, the sounds of fighting, the crash of furniture and equipment. But I kept working. I kept poring over the data, trying to make sense of the research, trying to find the key to a cure. And then I found it. There was a component to the vaccine that the scientists had overlooked, a compound that could inhibit the infection's ability to replicate, a compound that could be synthesized even with limited equipment. "We have it," I shouted. "I know what to do." Maggie was still fighting, swinging the fire extinguisher like a battering ram, but she was tiring, her movements growing slower. "Get ready," I said. "I'm going to try to use it." I mixed the compound with a saline solution, filling a syringe. Then I turned to face the infected. The syringe held out like a weapon. "Stop," I said. "I have a way to stop you." The infected paused, their eyes fixed on me. The chorus of voices rose, but there was something different about it now, something cautious. "You cannot stop us," the voices said. "We are eternal. We are infinite. Maybe not, but I can slow you down. I can stop you from spreading." I injected the compound into my own arm. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the warmth in my chest surged, and I felt the infection's presence recede. The voices grew fainter, more distant, until they were gone entirely. I was free. "Frank," Maggie said, her voice shaking. "What did you do?" "I immunized myself. The infection can't touch me anymore." "But what about the rest of us? What about everyone else?" I looked at the infected, still standing in the doorway, their eyes glittering with hatred. "I'll make more, as much as I can, and we'll spread it, everywhere." The infected surged forward, and I was ready. I had the cure. I had the knowledge. I had the hope. The world was still worth saving, and I was going to save it. The syringe was empty, but its effects were immediate and undeniable. The infected in the doorway had stopped their advance, their glittering eyes fixed on me with something I hadn't seen before. Uncertainty, maybe even fear. I'd done it. I'd immunized myself against the infection. The voices that had been whispering in my head for days had fallen silent, replaced by the blessed clarity of my own thoughts. But the infected were still there, still hungry, still waiting. "Frank, look out," Maggie shouted. I spun around, barely dodging the grasping hands of an infected who had slipped through the barricade. I swung the empty syringe like a weapon, catching it across the face. It recoiled, hissing, but didn't retreat. Its eyes were fixed on the wound I'd just made, the small puncture mark on my arm where I'd injected the compound. It could smell the cure in my blood, and it wanted it. "Everyone, get behind me," I yelled. "I don't know if this will work, but I'm going to try something." I grabbed a scalpel from the lab table and made a small cut on my palm, letting the blood well up. The infected in the doorway sniffed the air, their nostrils flaring. They could smell it, the compound, the cure, the thing that would destroy them. "I have something you want," I said, holding up my bleeding hand. "Something that can stop you, something that can free the people you've taken." The chorus of voices rose, but it was different now, fractured, uncertain. "You cannot free them," the voices said. "They are part of us. They are us. They're prisoners. You've trapped them in your collective, enslaved their minds. but I can set them free. I took a step forward, my bloody hand extended. The infected in the doorway took a step back, their faces contorting with fear. "Leave this place," I said. "Go back to wherever you came from. Tell the others what you've seen here. Tell them that humanity has found a weapon that can destroy you." The infected hesitated, their glittering eyes darting between me and the blood on my hand. Then, slowly, they began to retreat. One by one, they turned and shuffled away, disappearing into the darkness of the facility. "Frank," Maggie breathed, "you did it. You drove them away. I bought us some time, that's all. They'll be back. They'll bring more." I collapsed against the lab table, the adrenaline leaving my body. Maggie rushed to my side, her hands checking the wound on my palm. "You're bleeding." "I know, but it's worth it. The blood is the key. The compound is in my bloodstream now. Every drop of my blood carries the cure." The nurse from Maple Grove, Emily, I remembered, appeared at my side, her medical training taking over. She wrapped my hand in a bandage, her movements quick and efficient. "How long will the cure stay in your system?" she asked. "I don't know, hours, maybe days, but I can synthesize more. I know the formula now. I can make enough for everyone. Then we need to get to work. We'll need equipment, supplies. This lab has the basics, but we'll need more if we're going to produce enough." I nodded, forcing myself to my feet. "Let's get started." We spent the next 48 hours working in shifts, barely sleeping, barely eating. Emily and I oversaw the synthesis of the compound, using the research data I'd retrieved to guide us. Maggie and the other survivors kept watch, patrolling the facility and reporting on the infected's movements. The infected had retreated, but they hadn't gone far. They were gathering in the valley below, their numbers growing by the hour. They were waiting, watching, planning. "They're organizing," Maggie reported on the second night. "They're forming ranks. It looks like they're getting ready for something." "A full assault," I said. "They're going to try to overwhelm us. But you've got the cure. You can stop them." "Not yet. We've only synthesized enough for a dozen people, and it takes time, hours for each batch. We can't produce it fast enough to stop an army." "Then what do we do?" I thought about that. The infected had the advantage of numbers, but we had something they didn't: knowledge. We knew how the infection worked. We knew its weaknesses, and we knew that the cure, if used correctly, could not only prevent infection, but also reverse it in early stages. "There's another option," I said slowly. "One that might be riskier, but it could give us a real chance." "What kind of option?" "We don't just immunize people. We use the cure as a weapon. We find a way to spread it through the infected population." "How?" "We can't inject them all. There are thousands of them." "I know, but the compound is airborne. If we can aerosolize it, we could release it into the valley, let the wind carry it to them." Emily looked up from her work, her eyes wide. "That would require a massive amount of the compound, more than we can produce with the equipment we have." "Then we build better equipment, or we find another way to disperse it." Maggie frowned. "And if it doesn't work, if the aerosolized compound doesn't affect them, then we'll have to think of something else. But we have to try." 3 days later, we had produced enough of the compound to fill 5 large aerosol containers. They were clumsy, jury-rigged devices, but they would work. We had also immunized ourselves and the other survivors, ensuring that we wouldn't be affected by the compound. Tonight, we would unleash the cure. "I've been monitoring their movements," Maggie said, pointing to the valley below. "They've been gathering in the central courtyard. I think they're planning something big, maybe a coordinated attack." "That's perfect," I said. "If they're all gathered together, we'll be able to reach more of them at once." I looked at the volunteers, the survivors who had followed me from the church, who had risked everything to come here. They were tired, frightened, and running on fumes, but they were also determined. "This is it," I said. "Tonight, we take the fight to them. We show them that humanity is not finished, that we will not be consumed." We moved out at midnight, climbing to the highest point of the facility, a rooftop observation deck that overlooked the valley. Below us, the infected were gathered in the courtyard, their faces turned up to the blue aurora, their mouths moving in silent prayer. "Now," I said. We released the aerosol containers, and they drifted down into the valley on the wind. The infected looked up, their eyes widening as the mist settled over them. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly, the chorus of voices began to change. The synchronization fractured, the rhythm breaking down into chaos and confusion. "What's happening?" Emily asked. "I think it's working," I said. "The compound is disrupting their neural network. It's breaking the connection between them." Below us, the infected were convulsing, their bodies shaking as the compound worked its way through their systems. Some of them fell to the ground, their limbs twitching uncontrollably. Others stood motionless, their eyes glazed over, their mouths hanging open. And then, something extraordinary happened. One of the infected, a woman in her 30s, her clothes torn and bloody, stumbled to her feet. Her eyes were clear, her face human. She looked around at the chaos, confusion, and fear flickering across her features. What happened?" she asked, her voice trembling. The others were also changing. The glitter in their eyes faded, replaced by the dull, confused gaze of people waking from a nightmare. "The cure," I breathed. "It's working. It's reversing the infection." "We did it," Emily said, tears streaming down her face. "Frank, we did it." The valley was silent by dawn. The survivors of the infection, the people who had been consumed and then freed, were sitting in small groups, their faces blank with shock. They were trying to piece together what had happened to them, struggling to understand the nightmare they'd been part of. I walked among them, offering what comfort I could. Some of them were grateful, others were angry, blaming themselves for the things they'd done while under the infection's control. "You didn't have a choice," I told them. "The infection took away your free will. You were puppets, nothing more." "But we still did those things," one man said, his voice cracking. "We still hurt people. We still killed people." "Yes, and now you have a choice. You can let the guilt destroy you, or you can use it to fuel your fight. We have a chance to rebuild, to start over, but we have to be stronger. We have to be better." The man looked at me, something like hope flickering in his eyes. "You really think we can do that?" "I know we can. We've already survived the worst of it. Now, we have to survive the aftermath." The days that followed were difficult. The freed survivors were struggling to adapt, to reclaim their humanity. The network, the collective consciousness, had been fractured, but not destroyed. There were still pockets of infected resistance, small groups that had retreated to the mountains and the wilderness. We used the cure to immunize as many people as possible, creating a network of safe zones across the region. We established communications with other survivor groups, sharing our knowledge and resources. We began to rebuild, and I returned to the radio. The station was still standing, though it had been heavily damaged. The main studio was a wreck, but the basement, the reinforced room where Maggie and I had hidden, was intact. I set up my equipment, connected the generator, and began to broadcast again. "This is Frank Morrison," I said, my voice crackling over the airwaves. "I'm broadcasting from W. Carl AM, the voice of the Tri-County. I'm here to tell you that we've found a cure. We've found a way to fight back." I paused, letting the words sink in. The nightmare isn't over. There are still infected out there, still pockets of resistance. But we have hope now. We have a weapon, and we have each other. I looked at Maggie, who was sitting in the corner of the studio, a cup of coffee in her hands. She smiled at me, a tired but genuine smile. "I'm going to keep broadcasting," I continued. "I'm going to share everything we've learned. I'm going to tell you how to find us, how to join us, how to fight. Because we're not just survivors, we're resistance, and we will not be defeated." Weeks passed. Months. The world began to heal, slowly and painfully. The infected remained, but their numbers were dwindling. The cure was spreading, carried by the wind, by the water, by the blood of every immunized person. I continued to broadcast, sharing stories of hope and resilience. Maggie continued to work at my side, her strength and determination an inspiration to everyone around her. And the aurora? It had faded, its colors shifting to a soft, gentle blue that now looked almost peaceful. I learned, in the months that followed, what had happened. The blue aurora was the infection's final gambit, a last-ditch effort to spread itself across the world. But the cure had stopped it. The collective consciousness had been broken, and the individuals it had consumed were finally free. We had won. Not perfectly, not completely, but we had won. It was a warm summer evening when I recorded my final broadcast. "This is Frank Morrison," I said, my voice steady and calm. "I've been broadcasting for over a year now, and I've shared everything I know about the infection and how to fight it. But tonight, I want to share something else, something more personal." I paused, gathering my thoughts. When this nightmare began, I was just a radio operator trying to do my job. I didn't know if I'd survive. I didn't know if I'd ever see my family again. I didn't know if humanity had any future left. I took a breath, but I learned something. I learned that hope is not a luxury. It's a necessity. It's the thing that keeps us going, even when everything seems lost. It's the thing that makes us human. I looked at Maggie, sitting beside me, her hand in mine. "We've been through hell," I said. "We've seen things that will haunt us for the rest of our lives. We've lost people we loved. We've done things we're not proud of, but we survived, and that's what matters." I reached over and squeezed Maggie's hand. "I don't know what the future holds. I don't know if humanity will ever fully recover from this, but I know that we'll keep fighting. We'll keep rebuilding. We'll keep hoping." I leaned into the microphone, my voice dropping to a whisper. "And maybe one day, when the dust has settled and the world has healed, someone will find this recording. Someone will listen to it and know that we were here, that we fought, that we survived." I paused, then smiled. "This is Frank Morrison, signing off for the last time. Thank you for listening. Thank you for surviving, and remember, the dawn will always come." I turned off the microphone and sat back in my chair. Maggie looked at me, her eyes glistening with tears. "That was beautiful," she said. It was the truth. We sat in silence for a moment, listening to the sounds of the night, the crickets, the wind, the distant sound of a child's laughter. "We did it," she said. "We actually did it. We didn't do it alone. There were hundreds of people who helped, thousands. We were just the ones who happened to be here at the right time. Maybe, but you were the one who kept broadcasting. You were the one who gave them hope." I shook my head. "No, hope is something you give yourself. I just helped them find it." Maggie leaned over and kissed me, soft, gentle, full of promise. "What happens now?" she asked. "We rebuild. We keep going. We live our lives. And the infected? What about them?" I thought about the infection, about the collective consciousness that had nearly consumed humanity. I thought about the freed survivors, still struggling to reclaim their lives. I thought about the future, uncertain and unknowable. "They'll always be a part of our world," I said, "but they won't control us. We'll learn to live with them. We'll learn to coexist. Is that even possible? I don't know. But I believe in hope, and I believe in us." We walked out of the studio, into the night, and looked up at the sky. The aurora was gone, replaced by a canopy of stars. The dawn was coming. The dawn would always come, and we would be ready. The nightmares started 3 weeks after the victory. At first, they were formless, just a sense of dread that woke me in the cold hours before dawn, my heart racing, my sheets soaked with sweat. I'd lie in the darkness, listening to the sounds of the rebuilt town settling around me, and try to convince myself it was nothing, just stress, just the lingering trauma of everything we'd survived. But the nightmares grew sharper, more specific. I'd dream of the collective consciousness, vast and pulsing like a living thing. I'd dream of the voices, 1,000 of them, whispering in unison. And I'd dream of a single voice, rising above the chorus, calling my name. "Frank, Frank, come back to us." I'd wake, gasping, the words still echoing in my ears. Maggie noticed the change in me. She'd find me sitting on the edge of the bed at 3 a.m., staring at the wall, my mind still trapped in the dream. "Frank," she'd say, her voice soft with concern, "you need to talk to someone. This isn't healthy." "I'm fine," I'd lie, "just tired." But I wasn't fine, and the dreams were getting worse. It was a Thursday night when I heard the voice for the first time while awake. I was in the studio preparing for my evening broadcast. The station had been rebuilt, not as grand as the original, but functional. A small transmitter, a modest control room, a broadcast booth with a window that looked out onto the street. I was adjusting the gain on the microphone when I heard it. A whisper, barely audible, coming through the headphones. Frank. I froze, my hand hovering over the controls. The voice was familiar. Too familiar. Dale? I whispered. Frank, can you hear me? I pulled off the headphones, my heart pounding. The studio was empty. The street outside was quiet. There was no one there, but the voice had been real. I was sure of it. I started hearing it more often after that, in the quiet moments between broadcasts, in the silence of the night, in the rustle of leaves and the creak of floorboards. Frank, come back to us. It was always the same voice, always Dale's voice, always the same words. I tried to ignore it. I tried to convince myself it was just my imagination, my guilt playing tricks on me. Dale had sacrificed himself so we could escape. I owed him my life. Maybe the guilt was manifesting as auditory hallucinations, but deep down I knew the truth. The voice was real. The collective was still out there, and it was reaching out to me. I started researching, digging through the archives, the research data we'd retrieved from the facility. I needed to understand what I was dealing with. The cure had worked. It had broken the collective consciousness, freed the individuals trapped within it. But the collective itself hadn't been destroyed. It had retreated, regrouped, found a new way to survive. The collective is like a network, I explained to Emily, who had become our lead medical researcher. The cure fractured it, but it didn't destroy it. It just scattered it. Like a shattered mirror, the pieces are still there, still reflecting, still connected. Emily frowned. So the cure wasn't permanent. It was permanent for the individuals. Once someone is immunized, the infection can't reestablish control over them. But the collective itself, the consciousness that was formed from all those absorbed minds, it's still out there. It's just diminished. And it's reaching out to you. Why? I thought about that, because I'm connected to it. I was almost absorbed. I felt it in my mind, in my soul. Even though the cure freed me, that connection never fully healed. It's like a scar, a wound that hasn't quite closed. Emily looked troubled. That's dangerous, Frank. If the collective can reach you, it can influence you. It could try to bring you back. Not back. It can't reinfect me, but it can communicate. It can try to convince me. To do what? I shook my head. I don't know, but I'm going to find out. I started broadcasting again, but this time I was broadcasting to someone else. To the collective. I know you can hear me, I said into the microphone. I know you're still out there. I want to talk to you. For a long moment there was silence. Then slowly, the voice came through. Frank, you came back. We knew you would. Where are you? What do you want? We are everywhere, scattered, broken, but still here. We need you. Need me? Why? You tried to consume me. You tried to take everything from me. We miscalculated. We thought unity was the answer, but unity without diversity is emptiness. I felt a chill run down my spine. The collective was admitting it had been wrong. What are you saying? We have learned from you, from your resistance, your refusal to surrender. We see now that individuality is not a weakness. It is a strength. I leaned forward, my heart pounding. What do you want from me? Help us. Frank, help us. Become something new. The next few weeks were the strangest of my life. I continued my conversations with the collective, learning more about what it had become. The cure had scattered it, broken it into fragments. Each fragment was a piece of the original consciousness, but without the whole, it couldn't function. It was like a brain that had been split into individual lobes, each lobe trying to work on its own. We need a new structure, a new way of existing, a new collective. No, not a collective, something different, something that preserves individuality while still allowing connection. I thought about that. A network, not a hive, a community, not a collective, a way for minds to connect without losing themselves. That's possible, I said slowly, but it would require trust on both sides. You'd have to give up control. You'd have to let individuals be individuals. We understand. We have seen through your eyes the beauty of diversity, the power of difference. I felt a strange sense of hope. The collective had been our enemy, our nightmare, But now, it was asking for help, for guidance, for forgiveness. What would you need? I asked. You, Frank, you would be our bridge, our connection to humanity. You would help us learn. I made a decision that would change everything. I agreed to help. It wasn't easy. The others, Maggie, Emily, the survivors, were skeptical, even frightened. They'd seen what the collective could do. They'd felt its hunger, its power. You can't trust it, Frank, Maggie said. It's manipulating you. It's using you. I know, I said, but I also believe it's sincere. It's been broken, humbled. It's ready to change. And what if you're wrong? What if this is just another trick, another way to consume us? Then we'll deal with it. But if I'm right, if we can find a way to coexist, then we have a chance to build something new, something better. Maggie looked at me, her eyes full of pain. Frank, I can't lose you. Not now. Not after everything we've been through. You won't lose me, I promise. I began the work of helping the collective transform. It was a slow process. The collective was fragmented, confused, struggling to understand its new reality. But it was eager to learn, eager to become something different. I established a new frequency, a channel specifically for communication with the collective. I broadcasted daily, sharing stories of human life, human experience, human emotion. The collective absorbed it all, processing it, learning from it. Slowly, a new consciousness began to form, one that valued individuality, that cherished diversity, that understood, for the first time, the beauty of being human. We understand now, the collective said one evening. We were incomplete. We thought unity was the answer, but unity without diversity is just emptiness. You have shown us a better way. I smiled, feeling a sense of peace I hadn't felt in months. We can coexist, we can be different, and still be connected. That's what makes us strong. We will remember this. Frank, you have given us a gift. You have given us ourselves. Months passed. The nightmares faded. The voice that had haunted me became a friend, a partner, a guide. I continued to broadcast, sharing the story of our journey, the horror, the loss, the hope, the triumph. People listened, they understood, they believed. The world was rebuilding, slowly, painfully, imperfectly, but rebuilding. And I was part of it, not as a leader, not as a hero, just as a voice that had refused to be silenced. Thank you for listening, I said on my final broadcast. Thank you for surviving. Thank you for believing in hope. I paused, looking out at the town, at the people, at the world we were building together. This is Frank Morrison, signing off for the last time. Remember, the dawn will always come, and when it does, we'll be ready. I turned off the microphone and stood up. Maggie was at the door, her eyes glistening with tears. It's done, she said. It's done, I agreed. What happens now? I walked to the window and looked out at the town. Lights were flickering on, one by one. People were going about their lives, trying to find normalcy in a world that had been shattered and remade. We live, I said. We love. We build. We move forward. And the collective? What about them? I smiled. They're part of us now. Not enemies, not threats. Part of us. Maggie took my hand. That's what you've always done, isn't it? You've always found a way to bring people together, to find hope in the darkest places. It's what we all can do, if we choose to. We walked out of the studio into the night. The sky was clear, filled with stars. Somewhere in the distance, I could hear the sound of laughter, a child playing, a couple talking, a community living. The nightmare was over. The dawn had come, and the world, though forever changed, was still beautiful. The first sign that something had gone terribly wrong came at 3:47 a.m. on a Tuesday morning. I was deep in REM sleep, dreaming of something pleasant, a memory from before the outbreak, a summer day at the lake with my father, when the dream shattered into static. Not the gentle static of a poorly tuned radio, but something sharp and violent, like tearing metal, like a scream trapped in a signal. I woke gasping, my hand instinctively reaching for the emergency radio I kept on my nightstand. The device was cold, silent, its display dark. Frank? Maggie's voice came from beside me, thick with sleep. What is it? I don't know. Something woke me, something in the static. I sat up, straining my ears. The house was quiet, the town was quiet, but beneath that quiet, I could feel it, a presence, a pressure, like the atmosphere before a thunderstorm. And then I heard it, faint at first, barely a whisper, but growing louder with each passing second. A voice, hundreds of voices, thousands of voices, all speaking in unison, all saying the same words. The sky opens, the blood-red light descends, and all who see it shall be remade. No, it couldn't be. The collective had been transformed. The cure had worked. The infection had been stopped. But the voices were real. I could hear them, rising and falling like a tidal wave, building towards something terrible. "Maggie, get dressed," I said, my voice shaking. "We need to get to the station." The streets of the rebuilt town were empty, but I could see lights flickering in windows, other survivors waking, other people hearing the voices. The air was thick with something I couldn't name, something that made my skin crawl and my heart race. We reached the station in minutes. I burst through the door and powered up the transmitter, my hands trembling as I adjusted the frequencies. The voices were everywhere. They weren't just on one channel, they were on all of them, bleeding through every frequency, every signal, every connection. The collective had returned, and it was broadcasting on a scale I'd never imagined. "This is Frank Morrison," I said into the microphone. "I don't know who's listening, but I need you to hear me. The infection is back. The collective has returned. We need to..." A burst of static cut me off, and then a voice I recognized. "Frank, we thought we could change. We thought we could become something new, but we were wrong. Who is this? Identify yourself." "We are what remains, the fragments that could not heal. We are the echo." Echo, that was the word the collective had used to describe the broken pieces of itself, the fragments that had been scattered by the cure, the pieces that couldn't find a way back to wholeness. "What do you want?" I demanded. "We want to complete ourselves, to become whole again, to return to what we were. You can't. The cure stopped you. You were changed. We were weakened, not destroyed, and now we have found a way to return." My blood ran cold. "What way?" The voices paused, and then came the answer I'd been dreading. "Through you, Frank. You are our bridge, our connection, the one who survived absorption, the one who carries our mark. We will use you to rebuild, to reform, to return." I felt something shift in my mind, a presence, cold and alien, pressing against the edges of my consciousness. "Fight it, Frank," Maggie shouted. "Don't let them in." I tried to resist, tried to push the presence away, but it was stronger now, more determined. It had been waiting for this moment, biding its time, growing in strength. "Join us, Frank. Surrender to us. Become part of something greater." "Never," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "I'll never surrender to you." The presence receded, but I knew it wasn't gone. It was just waiting, biding its time, planning its next move. I spent the next few hours in a daze, trying to understand what had happened. The collective had been broken, but not destroyed. The cure had freed the individuals trapped within it, but it had also created fragments, echoes of the collective that had survived, hiding in the shadows, growing stronger. "Emily," I said, calling our lead medical researcher, "I need you to run some tests. I think the collective has been inside my mind. I think it's been using me as a conduit." Emily arrived within minutes, her face pale with concern. She drew blood, ran scans, analyzed the data. Hours passed as she worked, her expression growing more troubled by the minute. "Frank," she said finally, her voice shaking, "the cure is still in your system. You're immune to the infection, but there's something else, something I can't identify." "What do you mean?" "Your neural activity is unusual. There are patterns I've never seen before, patterns that don't match any known brain function." Could it be the collective? Could it be inside my head? I don't know, but I'm worried that your connection to the collective might be deeper than we thought. You were almost absorbed. That connection never fully healed. I thought about that. The dreams, the voices, the feeling of being pulled towards something vast and ancient. "If they're using me as a bridge," I said slowly, "then I can use them back. I can find out what they're planning. I can learn how to stop them. That's too dangerous, Frank. You could lose yourself. I've been lost before, and I found my way back. I'll do it again. The next few days were a blur of research and planning. I spent hours in the studio, broadcasting on the emergency frequency, trying to reach the survivors who were still out there. I shared everything I knew about the collective's return, about the echoes, about the danger we were facing. The echoes are fragments of the original collective, I explained. They're not as powerful as the full collective was, but they're still dangerous. They can still influence people. They can still spread the infection. I paused, gathering my thoughts. But there's hope. The echoes are scattered, fragmented. They don't have the same unity as the original collective, and that means we can fight them. We can stop them. I looked at Maggie, who was sitting in the corner of the studio, her face drawn with worry. We've survived worse than this, I said. We'll survive this too. That night, I had a visitor. He appeared in the doorway of the studio, a shadow in the darkness. I didn't recognize him at first. His face was gaunt, his eyes hollow, but then he stepped into the light, and I knew him. Dale, I breathed. He was changed. Not like the infected, not with the glittering eyes and the hunger, but changed nonetheless. His skin was pale, almost translucent, and there was something about his movements that wasn't quite human. Frank, he said, his voice thin and echoing, I need to warn you. Warn me about what? How are you here? I saw you die. I did die, but the collective, the echoes, they preserved me. They made me part of them. I stared at him, my heart pounding. You're not Dale. You're just a puppet, a shell. I am Dale. I am also more. The echoes have merged with me, used my mind as a vessel, but I'm still me. I'm still fighting. Fighting what? The echoes. They're growing stronger, Frank. They're learning from us, from the cure, from everything we've done, and they're planning something terrible. What are they planning? Dale's face contorted with pain. They're going to try to rebuild the collective, not through force, but through persuasion, through seduction. They'll offer people what they want, peace, unity, immortality, and people will accept it. They'll surrender willingly. But the cure, the immunization, that should protect them. It protects against infection, not against influence. The echoes can still reach people, still manipulate them, still make them believe that surrendering is the right choice. They don't need to infect people anymore. They just need to convince them. I felt a chill run down my spine. If they can persuade people to join them willingly, there's nothing we can do to stop them. Not nothing. You can still fight. You can still reach people. You can still show them the truth. But it won't be easy, Frank. The echoes are masters of persuasion. They know what people want. They know how to give it to them. Dale stepped closer, and I saw the pain in his eyes. The struggle between the man he'd been and the thing he'd become. You're the key, Frank, he said. You've always been the key. The echoes are using you as their bridge, but you can also use that connection. You can turn it against them. How? I don't know. But if anyone can figure it out, it's you. You've never given up. You've never stopped fighting. That's why the echoes are afraid of you. That's why they've been trying so hard to bring you into the fold. I looked at the man standing before me, the friend I'd mourned, the hero I'd admired. He was broken, twisted by forces beyond his control, but he was still fighting, still holding on. Thank you, Dale, I said. I won't forget this. You're welcome, Frank. Now go. The echoes are growing restless. I don't know how much longer I can hold them back. He vanished, dissolving into the shadows. I was alone in the studio, my mind racing with everything he'd told me. The echoes were seducing people. That was their new strategy. Not force, not fear, seduction. I thought about the people I'd met since the outbreak, the ones who had followed me, believed in me, trusted me. They were strong, resilient, determined. But they were also human. They had weaknesses. They had desires. They had things they wanted more than anything else. And the echoes could give them those things. Peace, unity, immortality, all wrapped up in a beautiful, seductive package. But it was a lie. The echoes couldn't give people what they truly wanted. They could only offer an illusion, a shadow of the real thing. And I had to show people that. I had to make them see the truth. I started broadcasting again, but this time, my message was different. I know you're out there, I said, and I know the echoes are reaching out to you. They're offering you peace. They're offering you unity. They're offering you everything you've ever wanted. I paused, letting the words sink in. But it's a lie. They can't give you what they're promising. They can only take what you already have. Your individuality, your humanity, your free will. I leaned closer to the microphone. I know it's tempting. I know it's hard to keep fighting. I know it's easier to just give up. But I'm asking you to hold on, just a little longer. Because we're not just fighting for survival. We're fighting for something more. We're fighting for the right to be ourselves, to be human, to be free. I looked at Maggie, who was watching me with tears in her eyes. Don't let them take that away from you. Don't surrender who you are. You're stronger than that. We all are. The days that followed were hard. The echoes continued their campaign of seduction, reaching out to people across the region. Some resisted, some didn't. I focused on building connections, strengthening the bonds between survivors, reminding them of what they were fighting for. I shared stories of hope, of resilience, of ordinary people doing extraordinary things. I reminded them that they weren't just survivors. They were human, and humanity was worth fighting for. Slowly, the tide began to turn. People started resisting the echo's influence. They started believing in themselves again. They started finding hope. It wasn't easy. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. And in the end, that was all any of us could ask for. I was in the studio one evening, preparing for my nightly broadcast, when the echoes reached out to me again. "Frank," they said, their voice soft and seductive, "you've been fighting for so long. Don't you want to rest? Don't you want to let go?" "No," I said. "I'll never stop fighting." "You're so strong, Frank, so determined, but even the strongest people need a break. Let us help you. Let us take away the burden. I don't need your help. I don't need anything from you. You don't need to fight alone. You don't need to carry the weight of the world on your shoulders. Let us carry it with you." I felt the pull again, the same warmth I'd felt before, the same seductive promise of peace and unity. But this time, I was ready. "No," I said firmly. "I won't surrender. I'll never surrender." The warmth faded, replaced by cold silence. And I knew, in that moment, that I had won. Not the final victory, that was still a long way off, but a small victory, a personal victory. The echoes couldn't have me. They couldn't use me. I was free. The months that followed were filled with struggle, but also with hope. The echoes continued their campaign, but they were weakening. People were resisting, finding strength in each other, in their communities, in their humanity. I continued to broadcast, sharing stories, spreading hope, and slowly the world began to heal. It wasn't easy. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress, and that was all that mattered. I was still the voice in the darkness, still the one who refused to be silenced. And as long as I was broadcasting, the echoes could never fully win. The winter of the second year was the hardest. Snow fell in sheets that blanketed the rebuilt town, transforming it into a silent white world. The cold seeped through every crack, every gap, every weakness in our fragile defenses. And with the cold came the hunger. Not our hunger, but the echoes' hunger. And they were growing desperate, their numbers dwindling, their influence fading. And desperate things do desperate things. I'd been broadcasting for 18 months now. 18 months of war against an enemy that existed in the spaces between thoughts, in the whispers at the edge of hearing, in the seductive promises of peace and unity. 18 months of watching people I cared about struggle, resist, and sometimes fall. The station had become more than just a broadcast center. It was a fortress, a sanctuary, a beacon of hope in a world that had lost its way. We'd fortified the building, stockpiled supplies, established a network of safe houses across the region. We were prepared for almost anything. Almost. The first attack came on a night when the snow was falling so thickly I couldn't see past the window. The power flickered, the generators sputtering as the cold seeped into their mechanisms. And then I heard it, a sound I hadn't heard in over a year. The rhythmic pulse, the heartbeat of the collective. But this time it was different. Weaker, more frantic, like a dying man's last gasp. "Frank," Maggie said, her voice tight with fear. "They're here. They're in the town." I rushed to the window, wiping away the condensation. Through the swirling snow, I could see them. Figures moving through the streets, their shapes distorted by the blizzard. There were dozens of them, hundreds maybe, and they were heading straight for the station. "Barricade the doors," I shouted. "Everyone to defensive positions." The station became a fortress. We'd prepared for this, drilled for this, but nothing could have fully prepared us for the reality of what we faced. The echoes had found a new way to spread themselves. They discovered that the cure, while effective against the infection, couldn't prevent possession, not true possession. They couldn't take control of immunized individuals, but they could influence them, manipulate them, turn them into unwitting agents. The people marching toward us weren't infected. They were immunized. They were our friends, our neighbors, our allies, and they were coming to destroy us. I watched from the window as the first wave reached the station's perimeter. They moved with mechanical precision, their faces blank, their eyes empty. They weren't fighting the influence. They'd surrendered to it. They'd given up their will, their humanity, their everything. "This is Frank Morrison," I broadcasted, my voice carrying across the emergency frequencies. "To the people marching on the station, I know you can hear me. I know you're still in there somewhere. Fight it, please, fight it. You're stronger than this." The figures paused for a moment, as if my words had reached them. Then they continued their advance, their purpose unchanged. "But they can't hear you," a voice said from behind me. I spun around. Dale was standing in the corner of the studio, his form flickering like a candle in the wind. "Frank, listen to me. The echoes have learned something new. They've learned how to block out external influence. They've created a wall around their followers' minds. Nothing you say can reach them." "Then how do I reach them? How do I break through?" Dale's face twisted with pain. "You can't, not directly. But you can reach the echoes themselves. You can convince them to let go." "How?" "They hate me. They want me dead. They fear you, Frank. You're the only one who's ever resisted them completely. You're the only one who's ever broken free. They're afraid that if you keep fighting, others will follow." I looked at the figures outside, still advancing, still relentless. What do I have to do? Face them, not with weapons, not with force. Face them with the truth. Show them what they've become. Remind them of who they used to be. I nodded slowly, understanding. "I'm going to need some help." The blizzard had intensified by the time I stepped outside. The wind howled like a living thing, biting through my coat, stinging my face. The figures were close now, close enough that I could see their faces, faces I recognized. Sarah, the young nurse who'd followed me from the church. Pastor Thomas, who'd sheltered us in Maple Grove. Emily, our lead medical researcher. They were all there, all of them, and they were all coming to kill me. "Stop," I said, my voice carrying across the wind. "Please, I don't want to fight you." The figures paused, their blank eyes fixed on me. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly, Sarah stepped forward. "Frank," she said, her voice flat and empty, "you should have stayed inside." "Sarah, I know you're in there. I know you can hear me. Please, fight this. You're stronger than they are." Her face contorted, a flicker of something human passing across it. Then it was gone, replaced by the same blank emptiness. "There's no point, Frank," she said. "They've won. They've always won. We were just too stubborn to see it." "That's not true. They haven't won, and they never will, because we're still here. We're still fighting. And we're never going to stop." I stepped closer, my hands raised in surrender. "Look at yourselves. Look at what they've made you into. You're not soldiers. You're not warriors. You're people who wanted to live, who wanted to protect their families, who wanted to build a better world. Don't let them take that away from you." Sarah's expression flickered again, the blankness cracking. I don't. You do. You remember what it was like. You remember the fear, the pain, the loss. But you also remember the hope, the love, the determination. That's still in you. That's still real. The figures around her began to stir, their movements hesitant. They were fighting it, fighting the influence that had consumed them. "I believe in you," I said. "I believe in all of you, and I know you can break free." Sarah let out a cry, a sound of pain and release, and then, slowly, the emptiness in her eyes began to fade. The blankness cracked, and I saw something human emerging from beneath it. "Frank," she whispered, I can see, I can hear, You're free, I said. You're all free. One by one, the figures began to change. The emptiness faded, replaced by confusion, then understanding, then grief. They looked at each other, at themselves, at the weapons in their hands, and they wept. I stood among them, letting them mourn, letting them heal. And in the distance, I could hear the echoes screaming, their last, desperate attempt to hold on to what they'd built. But it was too late. The spell was broken, the influence was gone, and the echoes were dying. The next few days were chaos. The freed survivors struggled to process what they'd been through, to come to terms with what they'd done. There was anger, guilt, recrimination, but there was also hope. They'd been given a second chance, and they were determined to make the most of it. I continued to broadcast, sharing the story of what had happened. I wanted people to know that even the most desperate situation could be overcome, that even the darkest night could be followed by dawn. The echoes never fully disappeared. They were still out there, scattered and weak, their influence fading, but they'd been defeated, not through force, not through violence, but through the simple power of human connection. We did it, Maggie said, sitting beside me in the studio. We actually did it. No, I said, we didn't do it. They did. They found the strength to fight back, even when it seemed impossible. They remembered who they were, and they chose to be human. She looked at me, her eyes filled with love. You helped them. You gave them hope. I just reminded them of what they already knew. The hope was always there, they just needed someone to show it to them. We sat in silence, listening to the sound of the wind outside. The blizzard had passed, leaving behind a world of pure, white snow. The station was quiet, peaceful, a sanctuary in the midst of chaos. What happens now? Maggie asked. We keep going. We keep building. We keep fighting. And the echoes. I thought about that. The echoes were still out there, still lurking at the edges of perception. They'd been defeated, but not destroyed. They'd be back. They'd always be back. We learn to coexist, I said. We learn to live with them, even if we can't trust them. We learn to be vigilant, to stay strong, to never give up. Maggie nodded, a small smile crossing her face. That's what you've always done, isn't it? You've always found a way to survive. We all have. We just need to remember that. We need to remember that we're not alone, that we're part of something bigger, something that can't be broken. I reached for the microphone and turned it on. This is Frank Morrison, I said. I'm still here, I'm still broadcasting, and I'm never going to stop. I looked out at the town, at the lights flickering in the windows, at the people beginning to rebuild their lives. The dawn will always come, I said, and when it does, we'll be ready. 3 years after the outbreak, the world was still broken, but it was healing. I'd spent countless hours in the rebuilt studio, watching the slow progress of recovery from my window. The town had grown, not to its former size, but enough to feel alive again. New buildings had risen from the rubble. New families had formed from the scattered survivors. New hope had taken root in the soil of our collective grief. But some wounds never fully healed. Some scars ran too deep. The echoes were still out there, lurking at the edges of our awareness. They'd become more passive over time, their influence waning as humanity grew stronger. But they were still present, still watching, still waiting for an opportunity to return. I'd learned to live with them. We all had. It was like having a ghost in the corner of your vision, always there, never quite visible, but impossible to ignore. Maggie and I had built a life together in the aftermath. We'd married in a small ceremony, surrounded by the survivors who had become our family. We'd adopted 2 children, orphans of the outbreak, children who had lost everything and found a new home with us. We'd found purpose, meaning, joy. But the echoes were always there, a constant reminder of what we'd lost and what we still had to fight for. It was a spring evening when I heard the transmission. I was in the studio, preparing for my nightly broadcast, when a strange signal bled through the static. It wasn't like the echoes' whispers. Those were always accompanied by that rhythmic pulse, that sense of pressure in the air. This was different, cleaner, more deliberate. I adjusted the frequency, trying to isolate the signal. It was faint, barely audible, but I could make out words. A voice, speaking in English with a slight accent I couldn't quite place. Repeat. This is Dr. Elena Vasquez. broadcasting from the International Space Station. If anyone can hear this, please respond. We have information about the outbreak. We have a warning. I sat up straight, my heart pounding. The International Space Station? It had been years since anyone had heard from the space program. We'd assumed they were lost, that the outbreak had reached them too. This is Frank Morrison, I said, my voice shaking. I'm broadcasting from WKRL AM in the Tri-County region. I can hear you. Please tell me what's happening. There was a long pause, filled with static and crackling interference. Then the voice returned, clearer now. Frank Morrison. Thank God. I thought no one was left. I thought we were alone. Who are you? What happened to the space station? My name is Dr. Elena Vasquez. I'm a biologist. I was part of a research team studying the effects of long-term space exposure on the human body. When the outbreak started, we were in orbit. We watched it all happen. We saw the cities go dark. We saw the aurora spread across the planet. We saw it too. We've been fighting ever since. I know. We've been monitoring your broadcasts. We know about the cure, about the resistance, about everything you've done. We've been trying to reach you for months, but the interference was too strong. I felt a surge of hope. What do you need? How can we help? Frank, I'm going to tell you something that will be difficult to hear. The outbreak wasn't random. It wasn't an accident. It was intentional. The words hit me like a physical blow. What do you mean? The parasite, the infection, it was created, engineered. It was designed to spread through human populations to create a collective consciousness. And it was designed to be controlled. Controlled by who? We don't know. The data we've gathered suggests that the outbreak was triggered by a signal, a transmission from an unknown source. We've been tracing it back, trying to find its origin. And we think we've found it. I gripped the edge of the console, my knuckles white. Where? The signal is coming from the moon. The moon. The words echoed in my mind, impossible to process. The moon. A signal from the moon. Someone, or something, had triggered the outbreak from the lunar surface. That's impossible, I said. There's no one on the moon. There hasn't been anyone on the moon for decades. Frank, I need you to listen carefully. What I'm about to tell you is going to sound like science fiction, but I need you to believe me. I'm listening. Before the outbreak, there was a secret project, a joint venture between several governments. They sent a team to the moon to investigate an anomaly, a structure buried beneath the lunar surface. They didn't tell anyone. They didn't share their findings, but we know now what they found. What did they find? A transmitter, a device designed to send signals across vast distances, and it was active. Someone, or something, had been using it for centuries. Centuries? Frank, the structure on the moon is not of human origin. We don't know who built it or why, but we know what it was used for. It was used to trigger the outbreak, to activate the parasite that nearly destroyed humanity. I felt the room spin around me. The weight of what she was saying was too much to process. Why? I asked. Why would someone do that? We don't know, but we think the transmitter was meant to activate a dormant parasite, one that had been waiting for the right moment to emerge. The outbreak wasn't a disease. It was an invasion, a deliberate attempt to take over humanity. I sat in the studio for hours after the transmission ended, trying to absorb everything I'd learned. The outbreak was engineered. The collective was a weapon. And somewhere on the moon, a transmitter was still active, waiting to be used again. Maggie found me there, slumped in my chair, staring at the console. Frank, what happened? You look like you've seen a ghost. Worse, I said. I've seen the truth. I told her everything. The space station, the signal, the transmitter on the moon. She listened in silence, her face growing paler with each word. So the outbreak wasn't natural, she said finally. It was planned. Yes, and the transmitter is still active. Dr. Vasquez thinks it could be used again, to trigger another outbreak, or something worse. What are we going to do? I shook my head. I don't know. I don't even know where to start. The next few days were a blur of research and planning. I communicated with Dr. Vasquez as often as the signal allowed, piecing together the fragments of information she'd gathered. The transmitter on the moon was powered by a source we didn't understand, something ancient and alien. It had been active for centuries, waiting for the right moment to activate. And now that it had been used once, it could be used again. We need to destroy it, I said. That's the only way to be sure. Destroying it won't be easy, Dr. Vasquez said. The structure is buried deep beneath the lunar surface. We need a team, equipment, resources we don't have. Then we find a way. We have to. I made a decision that would change everything. I would go to the moon. It was a crazy idea. Impossible. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I was the only one who could do it. I was the only one who had resisted the collective completely. I was the only one who had faced the echoes and survived. If anyone could confront the source of the outbreak, it was me. Maggie tried to talk me out of it. So did Emily, and Pastor Thomas, and everyone else who cared about me. Frank, you can't do this, Maggie said. It's suicide. Maybe. But if I don't try, everyone I love will be in danger. The transmitter is still active. It could be used again at any moment. I have to stop it. Then let me come with you. No, you need to stay here. You need to keep the resistance going. If I don't come back, you'll be the one to lead them. She looked at me, tears streaming down her face. Frank, I can't lose you. Not now. Not after everything we've been through. You won't lose me. I promise. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of preparation. Dr. Vasquez and her team on the space station coordinated with us, using their remaining resources to guide us. We found an old launch facility, still partially intact, and began refurbishing a spacecraft that had been left behind. It was a long shot. The spacecraft was decades old, its systems obsolete, but it was our only chance. On the night of the launch, I said goodbye to everyone. Maggie held me tight, her tears soaking into my shirt. Our children clung to me, not understanding why their father was leaving. I'll be back, I said. I promise. Don't make promises you can't keep, Maggie said. I won't. I'll come back, whatever it takes. The launch was smooth, miraculously so. The old spacecraft carried me into orbit, where Dr. Vasquez guided me toward the space station. I docked with the station, meeting the crew for the first time. They were exhausted, worn thin by years of isolation, but they were determined. They'd been waiting for this moment for a long time. Welcome aboard, Dr. Vasquez said, shaking my hand. We have a lot of work to do. I'm ready, I said. Tell me what I need to know. The journey to the moon took 3 days. I spent them studying the data, learning everything I could about the structure and the transmitter. It was buried beneath the lunar surface, protected by a shell of ancient material that defied analysis. But there was a way in, a tunnel that had been dug by the original expedition. The tunnel leads to a chamber, Dr. Vasquez explained. Inside the chamber, there's the transmitter. It's massive, the size of a building, and it's still active. How do I stop it? You need to disable the power source. It's located at the base of the structure, but Frank, I have to warn you, the power source is protected. There are defenses we don't understand, ancient technology that could kill you in an instant. I understand the risks. Do you? Frank, you're not just fighting for yourself. You're fighting for everyone who's survived this nightmare, everyone who's still alive. I nodded, my jaw set. I know, and I'm ready. We landed on the lunar surface, in the early hours of the morning, Earth morning at least. The landscape was stark, beautiful, alien. I suited up and stepped out onto the moon, feeling the weight of history on my shoulders. The tunnel was exactly where the data said it would be, a dark opening in the lunar surface, leading down into the unknown. I descended into it, my flashlight cutting through the darkness. The tunnel opened into a vast chamber. In the center of the chamber was the transmitter, a massive structure, its surfaces covered in symbols I didn't recognize. It pulsed with a faint, rhythmic light, like a heartbeat. I approached it cautiously, looking for the power source. At the base of the structure, I found it, a glowing crystal, embedded in the ancient material. It was pulsing with the same rhythm as the transmitter. This is it, I said into the communicator. I've found the power source. Frank, be careful, Dr. Vasquez said. We don't know what will happen when you touch it. I know, but I have to try. I reached out and touched the crystal. The world exploded into light and sound and sensation. I felt the collective consciousness surge around me. Vast, ancient, hungry. I felt the echoes screaming, their voices rising in a chorus of rage and despair. I felt the transmitter pulsing, its rhythm growing faster and faster, and then I felt something else, a presence, a consciousness, something ancient and alien and unimaginably powerful. Frank Morrison, it said, its voice echoing in my mind. We have been waiting for you. Who are you? I demanded. What do you want? We are the architects. We created the parasite. We seeded it across the galaxy, using it to unite disparate species, to create harmony out of chaos. Your world was supposed to be our next masterpiece, but you resisted. You fought. You refused to become part of the whole, because we're not meant to be part of your whole. We're meant to be ourselves, to be human. The presence paused, considering. You are unique. Your species has achieved something we thought impossible. You have resisted the collective and emerged stronger. You have found a way to coexist with the echoes. You have proven that there is another path. Then why did you do this? Why did you try to destroy us? We did not try to destroy you. We tried to elevate you, to make you part of something greater. But we see now that you are not ready. Perhaps you will never be ready. And perhaps that is not a failure. The presence receded, its power fading. The crystal in my hand stopped pulsing, its light dimming to darkness. The transmitter was silent. The echoes were silent. The collective was silent. And I was alone. I emerged from the tunnel to find the lunar landscape bathed in silence. The transmitter was dead. The power source was inert. The threat was over. Dr. Vasquez's voice crackled through the communicator. Frank, are you okay? What happened? It's over, I said. The transmitter is destroyed. The collective is gone. The echoes are quiet. Quiet? What do you mean? I mean they're not fighting anymore. They're not trying to spread. They're just existing. I looked up at the Earth, hanging in the lunar sky like a blue marble. It was beautiful, fragile, precious. We won, I said. We actually won. The journey back to Earth was long, but I didn't mind. I had time to think, to process, to understand what had happened. The architects were gone. They'd retreated, their plans foiled, their species dismissed. The echoes were still there, but they were no longer a threat. They'd become passive, content to exist at the edges of our awareness. Humanity had survived, and more than survived, we'd thrived. We'd learned to coexist with the echoes, to live in a world that was forever changed but still beautiful. I returned to Earth to find Maggie and our children waiting for me. They embraced me, tears streaming down their faces. You came back, Maggie said. You actually came back. I promised I would, I said, and I never break my promises. The final broadcast came a week later. I sat in the studio, the microphone in front of me, and I spoke to the world. This is Frank Morrison. I'm broadcasting to you from the Tri-County region. I have news. The threat we've been fighting for so long is over. The transmitter on the moon has been destroyed. The collective is gone. The echoes are quiet. I paused, letting the words sink in. We've been through hell. We've lost so much. But we've also found something we didn't know we had. We've found resilience. We've found hope. We've found the strength to keep going, even when everything seemed lost. I took a deep breath. This is the end of our nightmare. But it's also the beginning of something new. A world that's been shattered and remade. A world that's been tested and proven stronger. A world that, despite everything, is still worth fighting for. I leaned closer to the microphone. Thank you for listening. Thank you for surviving. Thank you for being human. I turned off the microphone and sat back in my chair. The studio was quiet. The world outside was quiet. And for the first time in years, I felt at peace. The dawn had come, and it was beautiful. 5 years after the outbreak, I sat in the rebuilt studio and looked out at a world that had finally begun to heal. The town had grown beyond anything we'd imagined. New buildings rose where rubble had once stood. Children played in streets that had once been filled with the shuffling footsteps of the infected. Laughter echoed where screams had once reigned. Life had returned, stubborn and resilient and beautiful. I was older now. My hair had gone gray, and the lines on my face told the story of everything I'd survived. But I was still here, still broadcasting, still refusing to be silenced. Maggie was beside me, as she always was. Our children had grown, 2 teenagers now, bright and hopeful and full of dreams for a future that once seemed impossible. They didn't remember the nightmare the way we did. They'd been too young, too sheltered, but they knew the stories. They understood what their parents had fought for. And the echoes, they were still there, but they'd become something different, something almost peaceful. They'd learned to coexist with us, to exist at the edges of our awareness without trying to consume us. It wasn't perfect. There were still moments when the whispers grew louder, when the old fear crept back, but those moments were rare now. The echoes had accepted their new reality, and so had we. I reached for the microphone, my fingers tracing its familiar contours. I'd done this thousands of times now. It was as natural as breathing. "This is Frank Morrison," I said, my voice carrying across the airwaves. "I'm broadcasting to you from 6U Sumley-M, the voice of the Tri-County. It's a beautiful spring evening here, the kind of evening that reminds us why we fought so hard to survive." I paused, looking out at the town. Lights were flickering on in windows. People were gathering in the square, preparing for the weekly gathering that had become a tradition. Music drifted through the streets, someone playing a guitar, someone else singing along. "I've been thinking a lot lately about the journey we've been on," I continued. "About the nightmare we survived, about the hope that carried us through, and I've come to realize something important." I leaned closer to the microphone. The nightmare wasn't the end of our story. It was just a chapter, a dark chapter, yes, a chapter filled with pain and loss and fear. But it wasn't the final chapter. The final chapter is still being written, and it's being written by all of us. Every day, in every choice we make, we're deciding what kind of world we want to live in. I thought about everything I'd seen, the horror, the courage, the resilience. I thought about the people who'd sacrificed everything so that others could survive. I thought about the children who'd grown up in the shadow of the nightmare and emerged stronger for it. "We've learned so much from this experience," I said. "We've learned that we're stronger than we ever imagined. We've learned that hope is not a luxury, it's a necessity. We've learned that even in the darkest moments, the human spirit can find a way to shine." I paused, taking a breath. "And we've learned that we're not alone. That's the most important lesson of all. We're not alone. We have each other. We have our communities, our families, our friends. We have the connections that make us human, that make us whole, that make us capable of surviving anything." She smiled at me, her eyes glistening with tears. "We're ready," she said. "Everyone's gathered in the square." I nodded, turning back to the microphone. "I'm going to step away from the broadcast for a moment," I said, "but I'll be back. I'll always be back. That's what I do. That's who I am." I turned off the microphone and stood up, taking Maggie's hand. "It's time," she said. "It's time." We walked out of the studio together into the warm spring evening. The square was filled with people, hundreds of them, maybe thousands. They'd come from all over the region, gathering to celebrate the anniversary of the outbreak's end. The stage was set up in the center of the square, a simple wooden platform adorned with flowers and banners. I climbed the steps, my heart pounding with a familiar mix of nerves and excitement. "Thank you all for being here," I said, my voice carrying across the crowd. "Thank you for surviving. Thank you for fighting. Thank you for never giving up." The crowd cheered, their faces lit with joy and hope. "I'm not going to give a long speech," I continued. "I've done enough of that over the years. Instead, I want to share something with you, something I've been thinking about for a long time." I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small object, a device I'd carried with me for years. It was the handheld recorder I'd used during the outbreak, the one that had captured my broadcasts from the basement, from the river, from the research facility. "This recorder has been with me through everything," I said. "It's recorded my darkest moments and my brightest hopes. And tonight, I want to play something for you, something I recorded a long time ago." I pressed the play button, and my voice filled the square, younger, more desperate, more frightened. "This is Frank Morrison. I'm broadcasting from the basement studio of WCRL AM. The main building has been breached. I don't know how many of them there are, but I know they're not stopping. I know they're going to keep coming." The crowd fell silent, listening to the recording of a man who had been on the edge of despair. "I'm going to continue reporting. I'm going to tell you everything I know about what's happening, but I need you to understand. This is not a drill. This is not a hoax. This is real. and it's happening right now, all around you. The recording continued, capturing the fear and determination of those early days. When it ended, the square was silent. "That was me," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "That was the man I used to be. Scared, uncertain, fighting for his life. But I didn't give up. I kept broadcasting. I kept fighting. And in the end, I found hope." I looked at the crowd, at the faces of the people who had survived with me. "Hope is not something you find," I said. "It's something you create. It's something you build, brick by brick, moment by moment. It's the choice to keep going, even when everything seems lost. It's the decision to believe that tomorrow will be better, even when today is unbearable." I took a deep breath. We've been through hell together. We've lost people we loved. We've seen things that will haunt us forever. But we're still here. We're still fighting. We're still hoping. The crowd began to cheer, their voices rising in a wave of sound. "This is the dawn," I said. "This is what we've been fighting for. A world where children can grow up without fear. A world where hope is not a luxury, but a right. A world where we can be human. Fully, completely, unapologetically human." I raised my hand, and the crowd fell silent. "Thank you for listening. Thank you for surviving. Thank you for being part of this journey." The celebration lasted long into the night. I stayed in the square talking to people, listening to their stories. There was so much joy in the air, so much relief, so much gratitude. But eventually I slipped away. I needed a moment alone. I walked through the quiet streets of the rebuilt town, past the homes that had been rebuilt, past the gardens that had been planted, past the children who were still laughing and playing. The echoes were there, faint whispers at the edge of perception, but they were peaceful now. They'd accepted their place in the world, and we'd accepted ours. I found myself at the edge of town, looking out at the countryside. The moon was full overhead, casting silver light across the fields. Somewhere in the distance, I could hear the sound of a river, the same river that had saved us all those years ago. Frank. I turned. Maggie was standing behind me, her face soft with love. "What are you doing out here?" she asked. I needed a moment to think, to reflect. "I know." She took my hand. "It's a lot, isn't it? All of it. The memories, the loss, the hope. All of it," I agreed. We stood together in silence, looking out at the world we'd helped rebuild. "Do you think we'll ever fully heal?" she asked. "I don't know," I said. "I think some scars never fully fade, but I think that's okay. The scars remind us of what we've been through. They remind us that we survived, and they remind us to keep going." Maggie squeezed my hand. "You've given them so much, Frank. Your voice, your hope, your courage. I just did what anyone would do. I just refused to give up. That's why you're a hero. Not because you were strong, but because you chose to be. Every single day." I looked at her, this woman who had stood by me through everything. She'd been there from the beginning, in that basement studio, in the tunnel, in the chaos of those terrible days. She'd never wavered. She'd never lost faith. "I couldn't have done it without you," I said. "None of it. You were always there, always believing. I always knew you'd find a way. You always do." We stood together for a long time, watching the moon rise higher in the sky. The next morning, I returned to the studio. The building was quiet, peaceful, bathed in the golden light of the rising sun. I sat down at the console, the microphone in front of me. I didn't turn it on. I just sat there, thinking about everything that had happened. I thought about the voice I'd heard on the night the nightmare began. The voice that had whispered, "The sky opens, and the blood-red light descends." I thought about the fear I'd felt, the desperation, the determination. I thought about the journey I'd been on, the losses, the victories, the countless moments of hope and despair. I thought about the people I'd met, the lives I'd touched, the stories I'd shared. And I thought about the dawn that had finally come. I didn't need to broadcast anymore, not really. The world had healed enough that my voice was no longer a lifeline. But I kept broadcasting anyway, because it was who I was. It was what I did. "I'm going to end this broadcast," I said into the microphone, finally turning it on. "Not because I'm giving up, not because I'm stopping, but because I think it's time to let someone else speak." I paused, my heart pounding. I've been the voice of this community for a long time, and I'm proud of that. but I think it's time for a new voice, a younger voice, a voice that represents the future we've all been fighting for. I reached over and handed the microphone to a young woman who had been waiting in the corner of the studio. She was nervous, excited, full of hope. "Go ahead," I said. "It's your turn." She smiled, her eyes bright with tears. "Thank you, Frank, for everything." "This is Sarah," I said into the microphone. "She's one of our children. She grew up in the shadow of the outbreak, but she's determined to build a better world. She's going to be the new voice of WMCRL-AM, and I think she's going to do an amazing job." I stood up, leaving the microphone to Sarah. She sat down, her hands trembling, and began to speak. "Hello, everyone," she said. "My name is Sarah, and I'm honored to be here. I've grown up listening to Frank's broadcasts. They were my lifeline, my hope, my guide through the darkness. And now, I want to be that same lifeline for someone else." I walked out of the studio, a smile on my face. The sun was rising, casting golden light across the town. People were waking up, starting their day, living their lives. The dawn had come. The nightmare was over, and the future was bright. I found Maggie waiting for me outside, a cup of coffee in each hand. "She's going to do great," I said. "I know. She's got your spirit. She's got something better. She's got her own spirit, her own voice. That's the most important thing." We walked through the town together, hand in hand. The streets were bustling with activity. People going to work, children going to school, families going about their lives. It was ordinary. It was beautiful. "I'm proud of you," Maggie said, "for everything you've done, for never giving up." "I'm proud of us," I said, "for everything we've done together." The rest of the day passed in a blur of ordinary moments. I helped prepare dinner. I played with the children. I sat on the porch and watched the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and gold. And when night fell, I sat in the darkness and listened to the echoes. They were faint, barely audible, but they were there. A reminder of everything we'd survived. "Frank," the echoes whispered. "Frank, we remember." "I remember too," I said. "I remember everything. We were wrong. We see that now. You showed us another way, a better way. I know. And I forgive you." The echoes fell silent, and I felt a sense of peace wash over me. The past was the past. The future was still unwritten, and I was ready for whatever came next. The final broadcast came a month later. Not a broadcast to the world, but a broadcast to myself. A recording I would never share. "This is Frank Morrison," I said, my voice soft and reflective. "I've been thinking about everything that's happened. The nightmare, the resistance, the dawn, and I've realized something important." I paused, gathering my thoughts. The nightmare wasn't a punishment. It wasn't a tragedy. It was a lesson. A lesson about who we are and what we're capable of. A lesson about the power of hope and the strength of the human spirit. I looked out at the town, at the lights flickering in the windows, at the people going about their lives. We can't change the past. We can't undo the pain, but we can learn from it. We can use it to build something better, something stronger, something that will never be broken again. I leaned closer to the microphone. "This is Frank Morrison. I've been broadcasting for almost 10 years now, and I've shared everything I have to share. My fear, my hope, my love, my faith." I paused, tears streaming down my face. "Thank you for listening. Thank you for surviving. Thank you for being part of this incredible journey." I turned off the microphone and sat in the silence. The echoes were there, faint and peaceful. The town was quiet except for the sound of the wind. And for the first time in my life, I felt completely at peace. Maggie found me in the studio an hour later. I was still sitting in the darkness, staring at nothing, a smile on my face. "Frank," she said, "are you okay?" "I'm perfect," I said. "I've never been better." She sat down beside me, taking my hand. "What are you thinking about?" "I'm thinking about everything, the journey, the nightmare, the hope, the dawn. And what do you see?" I smiled, squeezing her hand. "I see a world that's still broken, but healing. I see people who've been through hell and come out stronger. I see children who will never know the fear we knew. I see hope, endless, beautiful hope." Maggie kissed my cheek. "That's beautiful, Frank. It's the truth. and the truth is always beautiful. We sat together in the darkness, watching the sun begin to rise over the town. The light crept across the sky, painting the clouds in shades of pink and gold. The echoes were silent, the world was peaceful, and the future was bright. This is the dawn, I thought. This is what we've been fighting for, and it was worth every moment.